Okay, so before this video starts, I just wanna say that this isn't my story. It's a fanfic. The link will be in the description, which will have other links as well. Also, with these videos I don't listen to the videos I upload, so if there is anything that is too bad or explicit for YouTube, then let me know and please timestamp it. Anyways, let's get into the video.
Hello?
Anime demigod.
Here?
Gaara was safe. The Akatsuki had taken the Shukaku, but Gaara was safe. That was all that mattered. Naruto stared at his stoic friend and a small smile crossed his face. It wasn't often that someone you knew died and then was resurrected. But Jinhurikis don't work inside the realms of normal logic. They are living reminders that they shouldn't be alive, that no matter what, they should have been erased years ago. Human sacrifices weren't supposed to last as long as they had. But this train of thought wasn't helping any, and Naruto knew that. Staring his friend in the eyes, Naruto raised his hand and offered it to Gaara. The redhead raised an eyebrow and used his sand to lift his hand and grasped Naruto's own firmly. "Thank you, my friend, for saving my life. I am indebted to you." Temari and Kankura stood behind their brother with grins on their faces. It wasn't often that Gaara showed this level of respect and warmth to anyone. Naruto merely nodded his head and clapped his hand on Gaara's shoulder. "We have to go now, my friend. I'll see you again one day." As the rest of his group said their goodbyes and turned to walk away, a sudden cold feeling washed over Naruto and he turned to look at the form of Gaara several feet behind him. A foreboding sense of premonition washed over him and he didn't want to go home at the moment. Sakura, Kakashi, and the rest watched as he sprinted back over to Gaara and placed both hands on the Kazekage's shoulders, alerting many to how close they were and causing many to fall into defensive stances. The Godame Kazekage simply puzzled at the distressed look on his friend's face and unfolded his arms. "What else do you need, Naruto? Ask, and if it's in my power, I shall help you." "Gaara, I just had a bad feeling. I need you to promise me that if I ever need to, that I can come live here. I have a bad feeling about going back to Konoha, and I just don't know. Just say that I can come here if need be." A ghost of a smile crept onto Gaara's face and he clapped a hand on Naruto's right shoulder as Naruto dropped his own. "Uzumaki Naruto, you are forever more welcome in Tsunagakuer. If you ever need help or refuge, we will welcome you with open arms." Naruto ducked his head and a single tear crawled down his face. At least, if worse ever came to worse, he was welcome in Gaara's village. Raising his head, he looked past his insomniac friend to the people of Suna and saw nothing but smiles and admiration. He closed his eyes again and stepped away from them all. He turned his head while walking away, and in the tiniest voice that carried on the wind, he whispered, "Thank you all. I shall see you again soon. The mission to destroy Akatsuki did not go as planned. Jiraiya was able to live, but he lost an arm to pain. Sasuke and his Hebai group had engaged Itachi and had not done very well. The gap between the brothers was still as wide as a canyon. Hebai had run away, carrying their wounded leader, and the Konohanins had not been able to pursue. Their main concern was getting Jiraiya back to the village and having Tsunade fix him up. The mission was a failure. Better to regroup and come out alive, than to pursue a foe that could destroy them all. After much fussing and frantic crying from Tsunade over the stupidity of Jiraiya and his condition, the old hermit was fixed up and would be peeping on the girls again within months. Currently, he and Tsunade were sitting in the Hokage office with a very nervous Naruto. Tsunade cleared her throat and got his attention. "Now Naruto, I want you to know that you are not in trouble. Jiraiya and I have something to tell you that will rock not only your world, but the foundation of Konoha as we know it." Naruto gulped and sat up straighter in his chair. He wasn't in trouble, but this had something to do with him and he couldn't really see it being a good thing. The shiver he had after they rescued Gaara all those months ago came back full force and the sense of foreboding was almost overpowering. Everything in him was telling him to bolt, but morbid curiosity wouldn't allow it. Signaling with his hand for her to continue, he readied himself. "Naruto, this is about your parents, who they were, and what this means for you." A pin could have dropped and would have been heard with perfect clarity. The sound of inhalation broke the silence and Naruto was seen gripping the handles of his chair so hard that his knuckles were white. My parents? Who were they?" Jiraiya smiled at his apprentice and he and Tsunade crossed the room to sit in chairs in front of Naruto. A conversation such as this demanded not that they be professional, but that they be compassionate to a boy who, for all intents and purposes, was like a grandchild to the both of them. Tsunade smiled and started again. Your parents, Naruto, were Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina, two of the most powerful ninja this village has ever seen. Namikaze, Namikaze, where have I heard that name before? It sounds so familiar. Jiraiya laughed and slapped the arm of his chair. It should sound familiar, brat, that's the name of your idol, the Yondaime Hokage. My father was the Yondaime Hokage? But, why was I never told? A sad smile came onto Tsunade's face as she patted his knee. Your parents didn't want you to get a big head, Naruto, because of who they were. They were humble people and expected you to be as well. It was your father's dying wish that you be seen as a hero, but we all see how that turned out. Your mother was beautiful, a loud-mouthed tomboy at heart, but a beautiful person. Despite the way you grew up, Naruto, you're one of the noblest people in Konoha by birth. Then why was I made to live like trash? I could have been adopted or something. Why did I have to be all alone? I don't think they wanted me to be all alone. Jiraiya sighed and sat back in his chair. A proud smile adorned his haggard face. Tell me, Naruto, do you know how you got that name? No. Your parents named you after a character in one of my books. I'm named after one of the characters in one of your perverted books. Great, that's just what I need to know now. Hey, that's not true. This was an earlier novel of mine that wasn't as well received. Your mother loved it though. It was a story of a brave warrior who became a hero to his village. In fact, it really resembled your life up till now. I wrote down the Toadseer's prophecy and didn't realize it. This had piqued both Tsunade's and Naruto's interest, but only Tsunade had the voice to speak. Tell me, Jiraiya, how did it end? I never finished it. The publisher didn't like it, so I only got up to the point where the hero meets the villain pulling the strings behind the scenes and then nothing. The rest is a blank slate, Naruto. Your future is what you make of it. Do you have a picture of my parents? I want to see what they looked like. The last two of the Sunin stood in motion for him to follow them. We'll do you one better, brat. We'll show you your parents' house. Stepping out into the sun, Naruto realized how warm it was and tied his jacket around his waist. The black t-shirt he wore was just a little tight and showed off his toned body. Naruto wasn't mindful of the looks he was getting though. Today was one day he could care less. Today was the day he learned of his origins. Perhaps, just maybe, that premonition wasn't a bad thing after all. After marching through the village for what seemed like eternity, the trio stopped outside of a set of gates. Naruto stood in awe before his family's home, completely oblivious to the prodding of his two companions. Well? Wouldn't you like to go inside and see what you have here? He merely nodded dumbly and padded after the two Sunin, up to the door and inside. Looking around, he noticed that the fact that his parents were humble people was very apparent. Instead of a clan house, it was a very quaint 4-bedroom home, just big enough for a couple wanting to start a family. It was a very homey place with leather furniture and wood floors, a fireplace, and a larger-than-average kitchen. Naruto spun round and round, taking it all in. He heard Jiraiya sigh and turned back to his sensei. You know, the last time I was here was right before you were born. I was in a bit of a slump and Minato and Kushina insisted that I stay with them until I was my normal, jolly self. I'd never seen them so happy, talking about what a great kid they were going to have. Heh, if they could only see the hellion you grew up to be, they'd have never been so upbeat. Tsunade and Naruto chuckled at his joke. Jiraiya was trying to be enlightening while sorting through his own memories. Your mother was beautiful, Naruto. Redheads are always feisty ones. You get your attitude from her. She never took shit from anybody, including me. She was always such a blast to be around. Minato, well, he's public knowledge. He was a prankster extraordinaire and a very powerful man. Of course, he wouldn't have amounted to anything without my training, but that's beside the point. I loved your parents as if they were my own children and you, yourself, are my godchild. Then why didn't you come get me after it was all over? Naruto, I didn't step foot back in Konoha until that day you met me at the hot springs. You have no idea how shocked I was to see you. It was like looking at a fusion of Kushina and Minato, and yet, I didn't want to believe it. You couldn't be real. If you were alive, It was a painful reminder of duties that I had shirked. I'm sorry, Naruto. It's alright, Ero-sennin. I forgive you. I know all too well that the past is painful. Besides, meeting you in that way was a lot more fun and exciting than being raised by you. The three shared a laugh and eventually quieted back down. As he wiped the tears from his eyes, Naruto's vision settled on a photo of a red-headed woman and a blonde man, both in jounin uniform. Are they, is that them? Tsunade nodded and Naruto took the photo off the wall and sat in a chair, staring at it intently. He was indeed the vision of his mother in the face, while his hair and build resembled his father's. His chest began to ache and he had to set the picture down before he dropped it. Tsunade sat beside him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Now, don't cry. We have a lot of exploring to do and not much time to do it. We have a meeting with the council soon and you have to be there. What? Why? Because we're going to reinstate you as the last Namikaze. We have your father's and mother's will, your birth certificate, and several affidavits that say you are who you are. Unfortunately, for you to be reinstated as a clan after so long a period of inactivity, we'll need a majority vote from the council. After all, you've been registered as a ward of the state and an orphan since your birth. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Jiraiya nodded his head and clapped a hand on his shoulder. Just know, boy, that you've done a lot of good in your career as a ninja. Not many can do what you can. You're an asset to the village and unless there are a lot of bigots and grudge holders on that council, then we'll have no problem. Now, what say we investigate the rest of this house? Naruto nodded and followed after them, a small frown on his face. That bad feeling was back again and this time it was threatening to consume him. Tsunade had been arguing with the assembled council for a while now and it was disheartening to say the least. Despite all the evidence, despite his shining military record, despite all he had done for the village, some still held a grudge against the fox and still saw him as the monster inside him. Jiraiya was ready to blow any second. This is how they treat not only a fellow shinobi, but also a child of noble birth? Gritting his teeth, he seethed to himself. If this had been Uchiha Sasuke, they would have kissed his ass so fast. Naruto sat against the wall by the door, his head hung low. This must be what the feeling meant. He was denied his heritage, all that belonged to him was lost. He could care less about the land or the house, those were superficial things. He wanted the memories that belonged to him that were inside, the pictures, the books, the scrolls, his family heirlooms. He wanted his parents' legacy and he was denied that. He had stopped listening after their vote came up negative. Tsunade was in a rage. How can you deny him his heritage? He is a ninja of this village and you can't deny him his parents' things. Homura pushed his glasses further up on his nose and sighed. It wasn't that he didn't like the boy, he just didn't hate him either. He was completely neutral. But the Namikazes were good people and there was no sound proof that this boy was their son. He couldn't, in good conscience, let him have something that might not belong to him. Tsunade, what you say is true. We can't deny him his heritage, but there is no proof beyond your word that he even has a heritage. There is simply no way that I can vote for him to receive the holdings of the Namikaze property, nor can any of the other council members. I don't speak for everyone, but if there were proof beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would be the first to cast my vote for I. So all you need is proof? That's all. That is all. Fine. I want 1 month. I'll have your proof or we will never speak of this again and the Namikaze estates will be auctioned off. Agreed. Heads nodded and Tsunade and Jiraiya stormed off with Naruto in tow. Retreating to the Hokage office was the only thing they could do at the moment. They should have known that those idiots wouldn't let it go smoothly. Now all they had to do was find proof. Naruto, however, had had enough of political scheming and stood up, crossed the room, and placed his hands on the shoulders of his 2 older companions. Enough. I see now that I will never reach the heights I want to hear. My dream has always been just that, a dream. But I've achieved a certain goal of mine. I know now who my parents were and I can live happily knowing that I was a wanted child, that my parents didn't desert me or abandon me. But Konoha no longer holds anything for me. I want to leave Tsunade. I can't do that, Naruto. You'll be labeled a missing nin as soon as you exit the gates. But what if I wasn't a missing nin? What if you reassigned me to an allied village? Tsunade sat down behind her desk and folded her hands under her chin. Jiraiya took up his station behind her. You've put some thought into this, haven't you? Ever since we saved Gaara, I've had a bad feeling that wouldn't go away, like something was going to happen that would affect me greatly. I asked Gaara if he would give me a home if I ever had to leave the leaf, and he agreed. Please Baa-chan, don't make me stay here where I'm not appreciated. But Naruto, we appreciate you. Don't leave because of this. We'll fight it and we'll make it right. Naruto shook his head and smiled sadly. Baa-chan, I'm not stupid. I know that the council is against me. I don't have a future here except to die for a village that doesn't appreciate me. Do you know that I've never had a day go by here that I haven't been glared at, or insulted, or threatened with violence just for breathing? Do you know what I found in Suna? No, what? Acceptance. Adulation. Fellowship. I'm just one ninja, Tsunade, and I'm not the best. I'm powerful, but I know my shortcomings. I'm brash and loud and I don't think things through. Maybe in Suna I can find myself and I'll see you again one day, a better ninja and a better man. Please Baa-chan. Tsunade swiveled her chair so that he couldn't see her face. Tears cascaded down her cheeks as she looked at Jiraiya pleadingly, as if asking him what she should do. He had no answer but a frown and a knowing nod, to which her tears seemed to redouble. It was true what Naruto said. He had no future here, he had no life. At least there, in Suna, the people didn't glare at him, they didn't hate him. And he had friends there, genuine friends who knew who and what he was. A happy thought flitted through her mind. Maybe there, he'd find love from someone who was as strong as he was, in mind and body. No one here would let their daughters near him, and his crush seemed so far away. Yes, perhaps this was for the best. She swung the chair back around and gave him a teary grin. Well then, when do you want to leave? I want to do some things first. They may have denied me my heritage, but I'm not leaving without a few things that are rightfully mine, council be damned. I want my family scrolls, I want my family's pictures, and I want my father's coat. The rest you can do whatever you want with. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at his demands. And how do you intend to get all that, brat? I'm going back with you two one last time. I'm taking several sealing scrolls and I'm putting my family's things in them. Tsunade nodded her head, but then a fear crept into her mind. Naruto, those scrolls are important to the village. How do you intend to take them out without it being seen as treason? I'm going to make copies of whatever is written in them. We'll retrieve them and bring them here to the Hokage office, where I'll make copies and then we'll go see the council again and announce my transfer. They'll want the scrolls, you understand. Naruto set his mouth into a snarl and slammed his fist on the desk. They can't have them. Family scrolls are for family only, and if there are no namikazes left in Konoha then the scrolls need to be destroyed. I'll burn them myself if need be. I see. If you can't have your rightful property nobody will. I like that, brat. You know they'll throw a hissy fit, right? Like I give a damn. I don't care what they think anymore. Tsunade leaned back again and opened her desk drawer, taking out a bottle of sake and 3 dishes. Jiraiya and Naruto both raised their eyebrows while she uncorked the bottle and poured the sake into the dishes. Lifting hers, she bade the two to pick theirs up. Jiraiya did so with a grin on his face, but Naruto looked apprehensive. Tsunade sighed and thrust the dish into his hand. I wanted to have a drink with you when you were older, but I may not get that chance now. You're going to drink with Jiraiya and me and you're going to like it. We need to get good and shit-faced before we go about destroying important documents tomorrow. The three lifted their dishes and clinked them together before downing them. Naruto coughed and sputtered, drawing laughter out of his 2 older drinking buddies and prompting them to utter at the same time. Lightweight. The next morning found our trio back at the Namikaze household, and standing in front of a heavy oaken door with a red seal on it. Tsunade and Jiraiya had thrust Naruto to the front and stood behind him while he faced the wooden gate to his desires. Looking over his shoulder, he asked for guidance on what to do. Jiraiya huffed and smacked him on the head. All those years of studying seals didn't do jack squat with you, did it? It's a blood seal, you moron. Cut your thumb and run the blood across the seal and the door should open. It'll only do this for a person of Namikaze blood though. A light bulb seemed to come on in Tsunade's head. Wait. If that's true, then that's how we can prove his heritage. They'll have to believe us then. Naruto sighed and turned around as he bit his thumb. You know as well as I do it's a futile effort, Baa-chan. They don't want me to be a Namikaze and they'll probably say something stupid like, the demon altered his blood to that of the Hokage or some shit like that. Let's just do what we came here to do and copy them at your office. Without another word, Naruto swiped his thumb across the seal and it glowed a bright red before the door swung open and a musty smell came from the now open room. Coughing slightly, the three made their way in and stared in awe at the large amount of scrolls in the vault. Minato was a lover of knowledge and his library could rival that of the Hokage Tower. Kushina undoubtedly had her own stash in here, but the majority was Minato. Naruto smiled as he looked around. His parents were definitely knowledge hogs. Deciding to forego those thoughts for the moment, he turned to his companions and tossed them some scrolls. What ya waiting for? Get to sealing. Several hours later, the three had gathered every scroll in that library and were headed back to copy them all. Naruto looked at Tsunade and Jiraiya and sighed. He needed to do something to thank them for their help before he left. Suddenly an idea came to his head. Hey, tell you what. As thanks for helping me do all this, I'll buy you whatever liquor you want, my treat. What do you say? If their eyes could have lit up any more, he'd have been afraid their heads would catch on fire. He was soon shoved off to the nearest liquor store with a list as long as his forearm. Perhaps offering to buy for them wasn't a good idea. The copying process went very smoothly. After sitting there copying for about an hour, Naruto had gotten bored and summoned several clones to keep going while he took a break. Tsunade soon caught on and sent several as well. She wondered in the back of her mind, if that applied to Hokage paperwork too. Jiraiya, with his one arm, had to concentrate hard to get just the right amount of energy, but was able to make 2 clones to take over his workload. The rest of the evening was spent with the three getting drunk off their asses, while Tsunade sent a message to the council to meet again in 3 days. Maybe by then, Naruto would have enough time to look over everything he wanted and get what he needed. Tsunade entered the council room with Jiraiya and Naruto following closely behind her. This would be a day to remember one way or the other. For one, she was about to send a shinobi to another village without warning, and that was considered poor taste from a cage. The second reason was that she was going to allow said shinobi to destroy documents that could prove potentially useful to Konoha, and that definitely wouldn't sit well with the council. The third was that she had invited all of Naruto's friends to sit in on the proceedings, an unheard of thing in the history of Konoha. Seeing that everyone was getting restless, she started the meeting. Alright everyone, thank you for coming. We are here once again to decide whether or not you will allow Naruto to take up the name Namikaze and take the seat for that clan on this council. Last time you voted nay. What say you all this time? Homura, having been named the representative after his speech last time, stood and addressed the Hokage. Have you come across any new evidence to support the claims that one Uzumaki Naruto is indeed the son of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina? A collective gasp was heard from the section where his friends sat. Several murmurs were heard about how he did look like the fourth and that maybe he was somebody. Naruto grimaced when he heard that. It was as if you couldn't be somebody unless you were from a clan around Konoha. Tsunade shook her head. No, we haven't found any new evidence. Now what say you? The vote went around and it came up nay again. Tsunade sighed and hung her head. This sealed the deal. Very well. Uzumaki Naruto may never take the name Namikaze then, and the properties shall be sold off. This is the final decision of this council and may not be overturned. I shall now allow Naruto to take the floor as he has something of interest to tell you all. Naruto. He nodded his head and walked to the front of the room. Taking a rather large scroll from his back, he bit his thumb and swiped it over the length of the scroll, dumping out several more on the floor. Bending his knee, he picked up one and passed it to the council member closest to him. These are the family scrolls of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. As they are family scrolls, they cannot be allowed to fall into the hands of any untrustworthy people either in or out of Konoha. I have brought them all here to destroy them in front of the council, that they may never be used for ill. All the council members blanched at that and began to call out. Homura raised his hand, calling for silence. Whence did you come by these scrolls, boy? These were locked away in the Namikaze household, protected by several blood seals and traps. Only one who was of the Namikaze bloodline could. The old man's eyes grew large, large enough to bug out of his head. He lifted his gaze and locked eyes with Naruto, who had a sad look on his face. You really are. Before he could finish, Naruto had raised his hand and started speaking again. No, I am not. That was the supreme decision of this council. There are no Namikazes in Konoha anymore. Therefore, these scrolls must be destroyed and any evidence that could be used against the village must be destroyed also. I, myself, am no longer a part of this village as of tomorrow morning. I am being transferred to Suna, where I will take up station as a Sunanin, under the orders of the Godame Kaze Cage. I am only here to tell you of this myself. Everyone stood up and began shouting that he couldn't leave, he was the last Namikaze. It was foolish, he thought, that they would say this after a supreme decision. It couldn't be taken back. Besides, his mind had been made up. With a few quick hand signs and a cry of, Katon, Gukakyu no Jutsu, he incinerated all the scrolls, amidst a chorus of howls of anger. He felt a slight pinch in his heart as he destroyed his father's work, but took solace in the fact that only the originals were lost. His parents' work would live on through him. He turned to the council member who clung to the tiny scroll and held out his hand. He scowled when the man jerked back, cradling the scroll as if it were precious. You come in here and destroy our mightiest Hokage's work and expect me to give up the last thing we may have of him? I don't care if you are his son, I won't. He never finished what he was about to say because Naruto had leapt over the table and slammed him against the wall. His fangs bared, he snatched the scroll from the man and tossed it onto the bonfire in the middle of the room. Never say I'm his son. You idiots all denied me that right and I shall never forget it. I'm going to Suna now, a place where I hope I'll be appreciated. You won't have to put up with the demon brat anymore. You won't have to put up with Uzumaki Naruto anymore. I quit. He dropped the man and walked out of the room, heading towards his apartment, where he hoped to prepare to leave in the morning. He heard the sound of footsteps behind him and turned to find his ex-teammate Sakura, and the rest of his friends. He didn't want to see them right now, but then again, no time like the present. Sakura had decided she'd speak for the group. Naruto, you can't just leave. What will we do without you? The same thing you did when Sasuke left. Carry on. Don't worry about me, I'm going to a better place. Neji took his turn. But aren't you the one who told Sasuke that he didn't need to leave the village to become strong? You're running away from your problems, Naruto. Don't you dare compare me to him. Sasuke never had to put up with the crap I did. He wasn't hated for something he had no control over. He wasn't ostracized. I'm going to a place where I'll be appreciated for what I can do, not hated for what I never did. I'm sorry, but you'll all do fine without me. You did fine when I left the first time. Hinata walked to her crush, for what she thought could be the last time. Making her way slowly forward, she wrapped her arms around his neck and sobbed against his chest. Naruto smiled and looked down at the shorter Kunoichi. She was always so kind, if only he didn't have to leave. But alas, things never go as planned. SHH, Hinata, don't worry. I'll see you again someday. Promise me that in that time you'll get stronger. She looked back up at him and gave him a shaky smile, nodding her head. She didn't trust her voice at the moment as she slunk back beside Kiba and Shino. Naruto looked at the rest and did his best to keep his voice steady. Neji, I'm sorry but I'll have to break my promise to you. I won't be able to help you change the Hyuga. I expect you and Hinata to do it in my stead though. Lee, I'm sorry I won't be around to spar with you anymore. Tenten, I'm sorry I never got to know you better. Shikamaru, Chuji, I want you two to take care of yourselves and Ino. Don't let Asuma's sacrifice go to waste and take care of that kid of his. Shino, Kiba, take care of Hinata please. She needs your support more than ever. And Sakura, you'll have to try to find Sasuke on your own with Kakashi. I'll send whatever info I can on him and if I see him I'll try to subdue him, but I'm not making any more promises. I'm sorry guys but this is goodbye. He turned on his heel and left to pack, his heart breaking into pieces. He always hated saying goodbye to people and now it felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He had people who depended on him here, but they were all strong. They'd get along without him. The group stood and watched him fade away into the evening and one by one they began to walk off. The last to leave was Sakura. She couldn't believe that yet another of her teammates had left her all alone. She walked home sobbing to herself and thinking that if only he hadn't been denied what was rightfully his, this may have never happened. Naruto stood at the gates at sunrise, eager to begin his journey. Beside him stood Tsunade and Jiraiya, the only ones to come to see him off. Jiraiya had given him the last book of his series and made him promise to read it when he got a girlfriend. Naruto made a silent promise that if it was any good like the old pervert said, he might buy them all. Tsunade had nearly broken down in tears and hugged him until he turned blue. She was sniffling and hiccuping the whole time, and it took Jiraiya grabbing her ass to make her let go. She turned and glared at the one-armed man, promising pain later. Looking back at the young man before her, she smiled one last time and gave him a kiss on the forehead. That was for good luck. Now, you'll let us know when you get there, right? Of course. I'll have Gaara send a messenger bird. Are you sure you don't want us to notify him beforehand? Yeah, I want this to be a surprise. Well, I better go. Naruto turned to walk away before he remembered the one thing that he had promised to do. Oh yeah, Ero Sennin. I need you to do me a favor. And what's that? I don't think I should have the Toad contract anymore. After all, it's a Konoha contract and it needs to stay in Konoha. That's not up to me, kid, that's up to Gamabunta. It's his contract. Well, we better take care of this right now then. With a quick cry of, Kukiyos no Jutsu, the chief Toad appeared. I don't see any danger. Why was I called here? Down here, chief. Uzumaki. What do you want? I need to cancel our contract. I'm leaving Konoha. If Gamabunta could have looked any more surprised, it would have been comical. He merely looked at the boy with hurt in his eyes and asked the inevitable question. Why? Because I'm not appreciated here. I'm leaving and I think it's dishonorable to take a Konoha contract with me. I'm sure Ero Sennin can find a suitable replacement. Gamabunta's gaze turned set and he knocked his pipe out on the ground. There aren't many like you, kid. And you're right, I did agree to serve those who serve Konoha. No way I can convince you to stay. I'd rather you be my summoner than one who is unworthy. Sorry, chief, I can't. I have to do this. I'm really sorry that we never had that drink either. Tell your kids I'll miss them, okay? I will. And Jiraiya? This boy's replacement better be as good as him or you're toast. Goodbye, Naruto. I'm glad to have met you. Your father would be proud. With a large puff of smoke, Gamabunta disappeared and Naruto ducked his head to keep the tears from flowing. The Toads had been a part of him since he was 12 and it hurt to cancel his bind with them. Jiraiya put his arm around the boy's shoulder and gave a reassuring squeeze. Don't worry, brat. I'll make sure it ends up in the hands of someone who deserves it. I'll miss you, boy. Hi, I'll miss you too. You'll always be my favorite godparent. Jiraiya choked on a laugh and stood back, wiping the tears from his eyes. Tsunade stepped forward for the last time and wrapped him in a hug. I'll miss you, Naruto. I really will. Come visit sometime, okay? I will, Tsunade. I most definitely will. And next time, you're buying sake, okay? She laughed and stepped back beside Jiraiya, who put his arm around her shoulder for support. For once, Tsunade didn't berate him, she just leaned in and took what she could get. With a wave over his shoulder, Naruto was gone into the coming light. They watched him until he faded away, his white coat melting into the morning sun. It was like looking at the back of Minato all over again. Tsunade wiped away one last tear and looked up at Jiraiya, who looked down at her with a smile, which quickly faded as he saw her feral grin. Now then, what have I told you about grabbing my ass? As Naruto jogged on, he kept thinking he heard the screams of a pervert in the distance. The thought brought a smile to his face as he marched on to his new home. Hopefully, some things would never change. As Naruto trudged along the path, his thoughts went back to what he had learned earlier that week. His parents were good people, honorable people, and they had loved him. He was not happy with his father's decision to stick a demon inside him, but it was a hard thing for a man to decide to do. Do you decide that the life of your child is worth more than an entire village, or do you take the adage that, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, to heart? It was a troubling question and he didn't know if he had an answer to that. His father had been in a compromising position, and if he were placed in the same, he didn't know what his solution would have been. People stared at him as he passed them by. He had forsaken his orange jumpsuit. It was a reminder of what he had left behind in Konoha, a childhood that needed to end as soon as possible. It was time for a fresh start, and he had started that with a change of clothing. Wearing beige baggy pants, a black long-sleeved shirt, black sandals, and his father's battle coat with the sleeves shredded, he was quite an imposing figure. The tall collar of the coat shielded him from prying eyes somewhat, and for that he was grateful. He wasn't out of fire country yet, and there were undoubtedly some people from Konoha who would recognize him. He shifted the pack on his back and straightened up slightly. It was hard for him to cancel his contract with the Toads, but he felt it needed to be done. That contract had been in Konoha for quite a while, and it just felt wrong taking it away. Even if Jiraiya never found someone to summon them again, the contract would stay in the vaults until someone was deemed worthy. He mourned the loss of his friends from the Toads, but it was for the best. He wanted a fresh start in everything. Perhaps he'd find a new contract somewhere and it would rival the Toads in power. After a couple days of walking, Naruto found himself at the border of Fire Country and River Country. He grimaced when he remembered that was where they had found Gaara, dead on the ground with Deidara on top of him. It was not a happy memory, even if his friend was saved in the end. It was just a reminder that those bastards were still out there, even if they were weakened at the moment. He growled deep in his throat and some people walking by him turned and stared. He didn't notice and just kept walking. Thinking about Akatsuki wasn't going to help any. He needed to keep his thoughts about him, and look toward the future. He stopped about halfway through River Country for the night and made camp. He suddenly wished he hadn't been so hasty in giving up the Toad contract. Gamakaki would have made a good companion on the trip. He sighed and rested his chin on the folded arms supported by his knees. He hoped that his new life in Suna would be a happy one. At least he already had some friends there to make the transition easier. But going from an environment full of life and flora and fauna to one filled with never-ending sand and wind was quite a system shock. He stared into the fire and watched as the flames crackled and danced. He'd done so much in the past few days and it made his head spin. Deciding to try to bore himself to sleep, he summoned one of his mother's scrolls and began to read. Several hours had passed and he still wasn't asleep, but that was more from excitement than from a need of rest. This particular scroll was all about his mother's gardening ability. So that was where he got his affinity for botany. She had several tips for dealing with several different types of plants. He was intrigued with the idea of imbuing plants with chakra to make them grow and sending chakra into the ground to make grassy patches. If he saved up enough money to buy a plot of land in Suna, that would most definitely be a useful tactic. Snapping the scroll shut, he laid down and was soon asleep. Morning came earlier than he wished and he went about his morning ritual. He got out the picture of his parents and prayed that their souls were safe. He had heard over the years about the fate of his father and only hoped that Kami would have mercy on his and the other Hokage's souls. It wasn't fair that such noblemen were forced to suffer while monsters such as Akatsuki roamed the earth with no repercussions. He ran his fingers over the faces of his mother and father and let a single tear fall. His dream now, besides living a full life and having a family, was to meet his parents in the next life. He stared at the faintly twinkling stars in the morning sky and wondered if perhaps two were his parents. Shrugging off those thoughts, he wolfed down his breakfast of fruits and bread, sloshing it down with water. He used a Doton Jutsu to bury the remains of his fire and cleared away any evidence that he had been there. Shouldering his pack again, he continued down his path to Suna. He felt a familiar feeling the closer he got to the border and soon realized that he was close to the cave where the Akatsuki had taken Gaara. He shivered and shook himself to rid himself of the feeling. He didn't ever want to go back to that cave. He imagined the remains of Sasori were still there, what little humanity he had left rotting away with the ravages of time. Yes, he would definitely avoid that place. Soon the greens of River Country began to fade and the sands began to creep in. He had looked down when he heard the first crunch of the granules under his sandals. This was his new home. When he was truly in the country, actually in the desert, he had stopped and sniffed the stifling air, trying to acclimate himself to the heat and bareness. He would definitely have to try that gardening method of his mother's. For the moment though, he didn't want to be caught in a sandstorm and Sunagakuer was a few hours away. Channeling chakra to his legs, he crouched low before springing away across the desert, the sand behind him lifting in a wave before settling back down, as if he'd never been there. Gaara sat in his comfy chair, glaring at the mountains of paperwork that lay before him. He had taken the job to attain that which Uzumaki, no, his friend Naruto, had in spades. The power of caring, The power of forgiveness, the power of making a friend and protecting those he thought precious. He wanted to be someone of import, someone precious to the people, and he wanted to protect them. He stared hard at the papers and tried to incinerate them with his eyes. It was no use. This was how the people thanked him for being the Kazekage. They gave him multitudes of paperwork and expected him to sit in an office all day. He sighed as he sat back. He probably had lost control of his sand by now, sitting in this damnable chair all the time. For some reason his thoughts swung to his one, true friend in the world. Uzumaki Naruto was, is, and always will be an enigma to him. The boy was truly too forgiving in his opinion. He smiled when he thought about their first fight. He had never seen such sadness and understanding in someone's eyes as he had then. It made him happy that he had found someone such as himself, and sad at the same time that someone else carried a burden such as his. The boy had saved his life twice now, and he was eternally in his debt. He hadn't heard from his friend in quite a while now and was wondering how he was doing. He was just about to pick up his pen and return to his paperwork when a Chiryunin burst through the door looking quite distressed. Gaara looked up slowly, as intimidating as possible, and gave a long, drawn-out yes. Kazekage-sama, there is someone heading our way from the river country border. And? People come from that direction all the time. It's probably a traveler. They're traveling at a very high speed. Probably just a courier ninja. Nothing to worry about. They're kicking up the sand behind them in waves, like a boat breaking across water. Perhaps I should have a look after all. Temari and Kankura stood on the wall beside the entrance to Suna and stared out over the desert. Whoever was kicking up that much sand had to be extremely quick and powerful. They weren't normal, that's for sure. There was no mention of a messenger coming, nor was there any indication that their allies were in trouble. Their heads turned as one when they heard the swishing of sand and found their younger brother stepping out of a small whirlwind. He crossed his arms in his favorite pose and walked between them. What's the damage? Temari smiled at her little brother and looked back to the wave of sand getting closer. No damage. We just don't know what or who the hell that is. It's not a courier ninja. I've never seen one who could kick the sand up like that. The only people I can think of fast enough are Rock Lee or Mato Guy, and only after they've opened the gates. Kankura smirked and started to undo the scroll on his back. Nah, we'd have known if it was them. You can see that godforsaken spandex from miles away. This guy's wearing a white coat with flames. He has blonde hair and he's about your height, Gaara. Gaara stood and thought hard. Blonde hair, huh? There weren't many friendlies he knew of who had blonde hair unless who were male. That only left one person. His siblings watched with their eyes growing wide as that maniacal grin splayed across his face. They hadn't seen that look in quite a while. In fact, for Temari, the last time was with. I shall go down and greet our guest. Tell no one to interfere. Before they could protest, he was gone in a whirlwind of sand. Temari looked at Kankura and shrugged. You'd think those two could greet each other without trying to kill one another at least. Naruto began to slow when he saw the tops of the buildings of Suna over the last sand dune. He knew he was traveling fast, and if he didn't want to slam into the walls around the city, he needed to slow down or they'd be scraping him off. He wondered if they had seen him coming when a blast of sand erupted in front of him and he instinctively threw himself to the side, rolling on top of the sand and coming to a stop on one knee. He chuckled and stood in a defensive stance. Appears Gaara couldn't wait to see him. His red-haired friend stepped out of the fountain of sand with his arms crossed and that alarming grin on his face. Naruto sighed and stood straight up. Can't we greet each other like normal people? With a handshake or a hug? You don't have to showboat for the people of Suna. You are the Kazekage after all. Gaara's grin only grew wider and a playful glint came to his eyes that not many saw. We aren't normal people, Naruto. And besides, this way's more fun than a handshake. Naruto nodded his head and took his stance back up. He was going to lose here, more than likely. After all, the desert was a part of Gaara. He had all the ammunition in the world here. Sighing, Naruto formed his favorite seal and went after his friend. Above on the wall, most of the shinobi of Suna watched as their Kazekage decimated his friend. Kankura and Temari chuckled and outright laughed as Gaara flipped Naruto into the air and played with him like he was a ball. They admired the boy for not allowing his demon to come into play. If he had, the fight would have been over before it started, and even Gaara knew that. But the two were just playing, and that was evident, since Naruto managed to get in a few glancing blows. Temari heard a kunoichi beside her side dreamily and turned her head to the young girl. Something wrong? Of course not, Temari-sama. I was just thinking that the Kazekage and that other guy are very handsome. Temari cocked an eyebrow and looked back out at the two flipping around. Well, the blonde was flipping around, Gaara was just standing there, although she knew he was enjoying himself. What makes you think the blonde is handsome? I can't even really see him from here. His build. He's average height, but he has broad shoulders and an athletic build. Not too big but not too small. Besides, neon blonde is a very exotic color for hair. I wonder if it's natural. Temari didn't answer, she just turned back to what was left of the fight. Gaara currently had Naruto upside down by the ankles and was talking to him face to face. From the easily seen grins on both their faces, she could tell that they were having a pleasant conversation. Suddenly, the upside-down blonde stuck his tongue out and disappeared in a poof of smoke, and the real Naruto sprang up from the sands and put Gaara in a headlock, while giving him an uji. Throwing her hands up to her mouth to choke back the laughter didn't help, as Kankura and her howled while the rest of the Sunanin sat in awe at the man manhandling their cage. Gaara had changed much in his time since the Shukaku was taken from him. While in front of his people he was still the cold, emotionless bastard he was from his youth. Around friends and family he could smile a little and relax. It helps when your best friend is a hyperactive idiot hell-bent on everyone having a good time. Their rough housing completed, the two stood and Gaara brought them over the gate on a platform of sand. Naruto felt a little uncomfortable with all the eyes on him until he remembered that no one in Suna hated him that he knew of. He was about to say hello when he found himself enveloped in a hug from Temari. Welcome back to Suna, Naruto. I hope you plan to stay for a little while. I've actually come to talk to Gaara about that. We're going to his office at the moment. Sorry, but I'll catch up with you two later. Me and the insomniac have things to discuss. Gaara muttered under his breath that he was standing right there as he and Naruto sunshined into his office. Naruto took in the unassuming room and smiled. If everything went as planned, this is where he would be receiving his orders from now on. He turned to his friend, who had taken up his station again in that comfy chair. Gaara motioned for him to sit and he let himself melt into the leather chair. So, to what do I owe this honor, Naruto? You don't make it a habit of visiting without reason. Naruto took a deep breath and looked the Kazekage in the eye. He told him the whole story behind his leaving, who his parents were, everything. At the end, he decided to drop his bomb. I want to become a Suna shinobi. A senbon needle could have dropped and Gaara wouldn't have noticed. This was almost unheard of. A Konohanin willingly coming to Suna was a genuine surprise. Of course, his natural curiosity was piqued. Why? The council denied me my heritage and birthright. I couldn't live there anymore, and I remember you saying that I could come here anytime. I want to be a ninja under your leadership. But what of your dream? Does Tsunade know of this? Why here? Yeah, Tsunade knows. She signed my release forms. I need your approval though. I'm still a genin after all, and that rank would carry over here. I guess I'd have to take the Chiryunin exams again. No, you wouldn't. I'll make you a Chiryunin right now, but Naruto, what about your dream? Dreams die, Gaara. I have a new dream now. I have my family heirlooms and scrolls and I want to start my own family. I'll make a new clan and it will rise here in Suna. That is, if you'll let me. Of course. I'll notify Tsunade immediately. Do you need any time before you take up duties? Just a little. I have a fair sum of money saved up and I wanted to buy a plot of land if I could. I just want to relax for a bit and read through my parents' scrolls. I want to know them a little better. Well, until you're ready you may stay at my family's compound. Temari and Kankura still live there and I don't think they'd mind you staying. I'll have to warn you not to eat Temari's cooking. She's a horrible chef. Kankura is passable, but not by much. If you're a better cook, I suggest you offer if you don't want to starve to death. Thank you, Gaara. I promise you I'll never let you down. The two stood and shook hands before Gaara summoned Temari to escort Naruto to the Sabuka compound. As the two blondes left, he smiled and sat down while writing his letter to Tsunade. You've never let me down before, you idiot. I don't expect you to now. Now the question is, where to put a new Chiryunin? Tamari kept cutting her eyes to the man walking beside her. She couldn't help but appreciate his looks once he was out of that jumpsuit. The coat definitely made him look familiar, like she'd seen him in a book somewhere. She couldn't put her finger on it though, and it bothered her. Her analytical mind just couldn't let go of a puzzle, and Uzumaki Naruto was definitely a puzzle. So what's it like at the Sabuka compound? She nearly didn't hear him, she was so lost in her thoughts. It's alright. I have to put up with Kankura and his puppets, but other than that it's nice. Gaara takes care of us. We never want for anything. I see. How are you and Shikamaru doing? Tamari narrowed her eyes and turned to face him, making him stop. Putting her hand on her hip, she shifted her weight to one leg. There is no me and Shikamaru. He's a competent person, but he's not boyfriend material. Hell, you're more boyfriend material than he is. They walked on in silence for a few minutes, but Naruto's prankster side couldn't let something like that slide. Boyfriend material, huh? Maybe I'll take you up on that later. The rest of the way was filled with a sputtering Tamari trying to regain her dignity while Naruto laughed his ass off. He was going to have so much fun with the Sabukus. They were way too uptight. Tamari ushered him into his room and shut the door after him, after giving him a hug and welcoming him to his new home. She left with a smile on her face, muttering about blonde idiots. Naruto sighed happily and looked around his room. Home, sweet home. Gaara meanwhile was putting the finishing touches on his message. He looked it over and nodded to himself. Yes, that would do nicely. Tsunade-sama. I accept the enrollment of one Uzumaki Naruto in my ranks of Suna Shinobi. I believe he will make a wonderful addition, and I thank you for giving him the option to come here peacefully. Worry not, my siblings and I shall watch out for him and make sure he doesn't get into too much trouble. I am sorry for your loss, as he is one of your best shinobi, but from what I have heard, most of Konoha will not mourn. One man's trash is another man's treasure after all. Please send all records of him via a courier as soon as possible. I thank you again, and please, do visit sometime. Naruto would like that, I'm sure. Go Dame Kaze Cage. Sabuka no Gaara. He tied the message to a bird's leg and sent it off toward Konoha. Life was definitely going to get more interesting with Naruto here. As Tamari walked down the street, back to the cage tower, she kept thinking over what Naruto had been picking on her about. She had never really had a boyfriend. All the guys in Suna were too scared of her and her brothers to ask her out. Besides Shikamaru, who was a total lazy ass, and Naruto, there weren't many who weren't afraid of her family. As she climbed the stairs, she thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to take him up on his offer, even if it was jokingly. She'd have to let him get settled in first, but then she'd spring her trap. As a fellow wind user, he'd be fun to train with, and she'd heard through the grapevine that he had imbued a powerful jutsu with wind manipulation. Yes, she'd definitely have to train with him. As she stood before the door to Gaara's office, she smirked as she had a brilliant stroke of genius. This'd teach that little asshole to make fun of her. She stepped inside and smiled at her brother, who knew immediately from that mischievous look that someone was in trouble. Brother dear, I have an idea as to what to do with our new Chiryunin. Naruto sat in his room alone, reading a scroll into the waning hours of the night. Gaara had stopped by earlier and said that he had sent a message and would give him a week to get settled in before he would be assigned to his new post. This gave Naruto plenty of time to read up on the history of his folks and get situated to Suna. Gaara's only request was that he eat lunch with the Sand siblings every day. That wasn't a bad condition. He liked Gaara's family. Tamari could be scary, but other than that she was a cool chick. Kankura was a prankster at heart like he was, and the two got along splendidly. He sat against the wall and read further into the scroll. His parents didn't really write much about themselves. It was mostly about their techniques, but any good ninja could garner much about a person from just that. His father was not a meticulous person, his writings flitted here and there, with attention only paid to the big things, like how to do this or that. His mother was painstakingly accurate about everything and he admired her for that. The two seemed to be polar opposites when it came to paperwork, but apparently when it came to life they had the same philosophy. Live hard, love hard. He sighed and banged his head against the wall. If only they could have lived. The next morning found Temari waking up to a wonderful smell. She didn't think about what she was wearing as she and Kankura were the only ones in the house. She had forgotten about Naruto overnight and walked into the kitchen wearing only an oversized t-shirt and her panties. Eyes half-lidded, she yawned and stretched as she said good morning to the shape at the counter. When she didn't hear the familiar grunt of her brother, she cracked her eyes a little wider and they flew wide open when she saw who was cooking. Clad only in boxers and a muscled shirt, was Naruto, flipping pancakes on his griddle and bacon frying in another. The two stood dumbfounded, just staring at each other. Temari, admiring his well-toned body and unnatural tan, liking the way his hair hung limp without a headband and the way the whiskers on his cheek made him seem feral. Naruto stood admiring those legs of hers, well-defined and toned, and thinking that her chest must have gotten bigger since he last saw her. He cocked his head to the side, completely oblivious to the fact that he was staring and drank up her face. She was definitely cute, although she could be bossy when she wanted. They would have stood there for quite a while until a gruff voice came from behind her. "You're burning breakfast, Naruto. Pay attention. Temari, put some pants on." Temari looked down at her attire and shrieked before rushing back upstairs to get dressed. Kankura looked at Naruto's blushing face and died laughing. It was going to be so fun teasing those two. He accepted the plate that Naruto handed him and smacked his lips appreciatively when he took his first bite. "This is really good, dude. Temari can't cook this good." "Shut up, asshole." She appeared at the door again, this time in her black battle kimono. She glared at the blonde boy, who blushed again and turned back to the stove. She smirked at his back and sat down at the table, looking longingly at Kankura's plate. He eyed her and put an arm around it protectively. "Wait your damn turn. This grub is mine. You could share, you know. I am older than you. Not on your life. This guy's cooking from now on and I ain't giving up my portions. It's way too good. You guys are embarrassing me. Here, Temari, sorry about earlier." She waved her hand dismissively and took a bite out of the pancake. She chewed slowly as he stood by, waiting for her reaction. She sat her fork down and turned to him. "This is without a doubt the most delicious thing I've eaten in quite a while." "Bravo, Squirt." Naruto growled at her, his elongated fangs showing. "You know, I'm not 12 anymore and I'm just as tall as you. Don't call me Squirt. I will if I want. Besides, you have a meeting with Gaara later on today. Your new assignment if I'm not mistaken. Congratulations on making Chiryunin, by the way." "Heh, thank you. I'm a jounin, you know. I still outrank you." "Humph, just eat your damn pancakes." Kankura looked back up from his bacon and smirked. "Oh yes, this would be so much fun. Naruto walked up to Gaara's receptionist and smiled at her. She blushed when she saw who he was and gave him a shy smile in return. "Can I help you? I'm here to see Gaara. I hear he has something he wishes to speak to me about." "Ah yes, Uzumaki-san, go right on in. He's been expecting you for a while now." "Thank you." As soon as he had closed the door, he was pinned to the wall by a blast of sand and Gaara stood before him. "I hope you don't expect me to accept tardiness here, Naruto. I won't have you turn into that worthless sensei of yours." Naruto laughed and struggled against his bonds before Gaara let the sand recede. "I cooked breakfast this morning and had to listen to your sister give a lecture about not being a pervert." "What did you do to my sister?" "We may be friends, Naruto, but if you..." "I didn't do anything. She forgot I was there and walked into the kitchen wearing a t-shirt and panties." "Your sister is gorgeous, by the way." "I can't help it, she's forgetful." "Indeed. Now sit, if you please." Once they were settled in, Gaara took up his arms crossed pose. "I sent off the message that you had arrived to Tsunade last night. I requested all your records and they should arrive soon. Now then, I have called you here because of your new assignment. One of our Chiryunin has been reassigned to a new post and I have need of your services in his stead. Do you accept?" "Of course, Gaara. Just tell me what I need to do." The former Jinhiriki smirked and stood grasping Naruto's hand in a firm shake. "I knew I could count on you, Naruto. You will report to the academy starting next week to begin your new assignment." "And that would be?" Why, sensei to the new academy students of course. Naruto's eyes went wide and he opened his mouth as if to scream, but nothing came out since Gaara clamped his sand over the boy's mouth. After several seconds of struggle, Naruto sighed in defeat and his shoulders slumped. Gaara let the sand recede and Naruto glared at him. I really hate you, you know that? What makes you think I'll be a good teacher anyway? You have the skills, you just need to apply them accordingly. Don't worry, it's not forever, just until I find someone more suitable. Here's a folder of all the information you need. I suggest you study up and get ready. Dismissed. Naruto grabbed the folder and stomped out of the office. Gaara smirked when he picked up the mumbled curses coming from his friend. The children would truly have an interesting year with their new sensei. Naruto sighed for what seemed the millionth time that night. He'd been going over the files of the students and what was expected of a Chunin teacher for a couple days now and he was not happy. The students were fine, he'd get to know them later. It was the class curriculum that bothered him. It seemed that every hidden village insisted on teaching history and other book-related topics over practical things. He scowled and leaned against the wall. He was going to change that with his class, consequences be damned. Knowing that you were responsible for teaching children how to be ninja, even if it was just the basics, was a huge burden. He wouldn't send them off half-cocked. He looked around at all the scattered files and picked up one of particular interest. It was the requirement for the graduates. Same as Konoha, Henge, Kawarimi, Bunshin. Despite their boast of quality shinobi, Suna had low starter standards like their ally. True, their numbers were lower because only the best of the academy were accepted, but his class wouldn't be like that. Pulling out a blank scroll, Naruto began to scribble furiously on the parchment. His class plan would break rules and tear down barriers, and if Gaara didn't like it, then let him try to stop him. Uzumaki Naruto always proved his detractors wrong. Naruto straightened himself out as he walked toward Gaara's office. Clad in his beige pants, black shirt, and battle coat with his Chunin vest beneath, he cast quite a shadow. He nodded his head to the receptionist and knocked on the door. He tugged on his vest again and smiled. Tamari had wanted to be the one to present it to him, but Gaara reserved the right of the headband for himself alone. A monotone voice bade him to enter and Naruto stepped inside. Gaara took in his friend's appearance and nodded approvingly. While I appreciate the change of color, I don't think your father would have approved of you tearing the sleeves off his coat. Yeah, well, it gives me a better range of movement. Besides, a sleeveless trench coat looks cool. Gaara sighed and walked around his desk. He presented Naruto with his headband and bowed to him. Naruto took it with a smile and bowed to his friend. The two straightened up and each took a chair. As Gaara made his way back to his comfy leather chair, Naruto tied the headband around his arm. He liked his hair better down anyway. Congratulations, new Chunin of Suna. I am proud to welcome you into our ranks. You don't need to say all that, Gaara. Shut up, idiot, I'm obligated to. Now where was I? Oh yes. The speech continued on for nearly 5 minutes in Gaara's drawling monotone, and Naruto was sure by the time it was over that the former Jinhiriki had only said the speech to make him mad. His eye twitching madly, he tried to keep his voice calm. Is that all, Kazekage-sama? Gaara frowned and the sand behind him swirled up. I thought I told you not to call me that. I thought I asked you not to say all of that spiel. Yes, well, that is my right. On to other topics. I assume you are prepared for your class. Yes. You've read the curriculum? Read the files on your students. Yes. I can trust you not to teach them frivolous things like that Warwick no jutsu of yours. They're children, Gaara. I wouldn't teach kids that jutsu. Not what I heard. All right then. Chunin Uzumaki, welcome officially to the Suna ranks. And Godspeed and good luck with those little brats, you're going to need it. Gee, thanks. Well, I gotta go. I'm fixing dinner again tonight and I've gotta get to the market. You're fixing dinner. MMHHMM. I'll be over later. Heh, see you then. Naruto hummed as he stood over the stove. Cooking had become something of a nerve soother for him and it relaxed him greatly. It was a plus that everyone enjoyed his cooking. He'd tried some of Tamari's fare and ate it politely, not wanting to hurt her feelings. Kankura, however, did not share his tact and ended up being brained by a frying pan. Poor Naruto had to run damage control between the two the rest of the evening. No wonder Gaara used to be homicidal. Naruto tensed when he felt someone lean over his shoulder, but eased up when he saw the golden tresses of Temari. Whatcha cooking? Naruto shrugged his shoulder to get her away and pushed her back with his free hand. None of your business. You'll find out when dinner's ready. Ah, but I want to know now. Well, tough shit. I'm not spoiling the surprise, but if you keep bugging me I won't make dessert either. The blonde beside him disappeared immediately. She absolutely adored the desserts Naruto had made in his short stay at the compound and had put a whole cake away by herself. She complained of an aching stomach the next day and Naruto berated her for being such a pig, earning him a knock on the head from her battle fan. Ah well, it was all in good fun. Staying with the Sand siblings was a real riot. He chuckled to himself and tasted what was in the pot. Needs more salt. An hour later Gaara showed up with Baki in tow. It was a good thing that Naruto made unusually sized portions. Between him and the Sand siblings, food never lasted long. As the four made small talk in the living room, Naruto began to set the table. Putting his fingers in his mouth, he let out a shrill whistle. All right. Soup's on. The four appeared at the table so fast Naruto thought they had used Shunshin. With a quick Itadakumesu everyone dove in. Naruto waited to see what they thought before he dug into his plate. Baki sat up straight and swallowed his mouthful before smiling at Naruto. This is very good Uzumaki. Much better than anything these three ever came up with. Shouts of indignation came from Kankura and Temari while Gaara just grunted and kept eating. No use arguing if the food got cold. Once everyone was done and patting their bellies, Naruto retreated to the kitchen and came back with a covered dish. Temari was literally bouncing in her seat from anticipation. Naruto pulled the cover off the dish to reveal a double chocolate cake. Temari was practically foaming at the mouth. Gaara looked over at her and sighed. Temari, close your mouth. You're drooling everywhere. Naruto just laughed as the kunoichi wiped her mouth off and held out her plate for a slice of cake. He cut her a generous portion and watched her dive into it. The others were no better though, except for Baki who kept some dignity while trying to shovel it in as fast as he could. Gaara, you're the Kazekage. You shouldn't eat like a pig. It sets a bad example for those of low station like myself. I'll remember that when you have to come up with extra curriculum for the children. Perhaps table manners would be a good subject. Perhaps. Dinner passed without much more incident and the five found themselves in the living room, passing around a sake bottle. Baki took a strong swig and passed it to Gaara, who declined, and passed it to Kankura. Baki stared at Naruto for a moment before speaking. So Uzumaki, any idea how you are going to teach all those brats? I do actually, but I'm not going to tell what my lesson plan is. I want my class to be unprepared for what I have in store for them. They'll find out in 2 days what kind of teacher I am. Temari took a swig and passed it to Naruto. So you won't tell us anything? Not even a little hint. Naruto smirked and took a swig before passing the bottle to Baki again. I'll just say that my curriculum will be as unorthodox as I am. We need ninja here in Suna, but more importantly we need quality ninja. I intend for my entire class to pass. Gaara stared at him incredulously before snorting. I've heard that claim before Naruto and believe me, that's a dead wish. It won't happen. I know what the requirements for Genin are Gaara. I intend for my class to surpass those standards. That's all. The other four stared at him for a second before going back to their drinks. Baki took a huge swig and sighed heavily. That'll be the day. Today was doomsday. Naruto groaned when the alarm clock went off and took a swipe at it, sending it across the room and into a wall. He sat up and looked bleary-eyed across the room before settling on the scrolls still spread out on his bed. He rubbed his eyes furiously and mussed his hair. Growling, he got out of the bed and set the alarm clock back on the bedside table. With a sigh, he got dressed in his now normal attire before going downstairs to start breakfast. Temari would be up soon and Kankura would follow. Naruto was lost in thought as he flipped the omelette. He was no genius and he'd accepted this role without any prior knowledge of what to do. Flying by the seat of his pants worked in battle but in a classroom structure was the watchword. He'd have to hope that what he was going to do wouldn't be frowned upon. He didn't like the idea of parents or an angry Gaara trying to kill him. Temari came in and said good morning. Naruto waved at her and set her omelette on the table, before turning back to fix another for Kankura. If bad things happened, then bad things happened. Naruto would make no excuses for what he was about to do to those children. He'd seen too much in his short life. He was 16 years old and was going to teach children just a few years younger than he. They couldn't understand what he had experienced in life, the solitude, the loneliness, the pain, the sadness. But he'd make them understand. Those kids would leave his classroom, not as he had left his, a stupid, simpering little fool. They'd all leave shinobi of the highest caliber or none of them would graduate at all. Kankura stumbled in and grunted. Naruto sat his plate in front of him and began his own omelette, still lost in thought. Tamari had watched the boy from the moment she entered the kitchen. He never looked at them, just kept making breakfast as if in a trance. She knew today was his first day as a teacher, but she'd never seen the hyperactive blonde so quiet. It was almost scary. But she knew enough from dealing with Gaara not to bother someone when they were being introspective. It wasn't good for anybody. She wanted to say something bad, but when the blonde dropped his plate on the table and ate absent-mindedly, she knew it wasn't her place. Kankura glanced across the table to his sister and nodded his head in Naruto's direction. She shook her head no. She wasn't going to interfere. Kankura sighed and sat up straight. "Oi Naruto, what the hell's with the long face?" The blonde looked up and gave the puppet master a confused look. "What's the deal, man? You nervous?" "Who wouldn't be? I don't know what I'm getting myself into. Hell, I don't even know if I'm good with kids." Tamari pushed her plate away and looked into his eyes. "You'll do fine, Naruto. I know you can do it." For some reason that settled him down some. He felt more at ease. He gave her a shaky smile and returned to his meal with more gusto. The siblings looked at each other and grinned. He'd be fine. Naruto strode down the hallway of the school with his files ready. He looked this way and that, trying to find his room, and saw someone leaning against the wall further down. Upon getting closer he saw it was Gaara, leaning outside his class door. The redhead looked at him and nodded. "Good luck, my friend. Don't let me down. I expect big things from this class." "Why?" "Because I'm so awesome." "No, because you're an idiot who has the devil's luck. I expect you at my office for lunch. Goodbye." Gaara was gone in a swirl of sand and Naruto took a deep breath before entering the room. His descent into hell had begun. The children were all hyped up today. They were getting a new sensei. Some had heard that he was a badass jounin who had been hurt and was on sick leave. Others had heard that he was a missing nin from another country that Kazekage-sama had convinced to become a Suna nin. Others had heard that it was a beautiful kunoichi who was as deadly as she was good-looking. None of them were even close. They all looked up when they heard the door latch turn. The room grew quiet as the door opened, revealing a teenager clad in beige pants, a long-sleeved black shirt with a Chiyunin vest over it and a sleeveless white trench coat with red flames around the bottom. The boys all stared in awe at how young he was. The girls blushed at his looks. The blonde hair was a rarity in Suna, only Tamari-sama had blonde hair and it wasn't that blonde. It seemed to fall about his head in a haphazard way and yet framed his face perfectly. Everyone wondered why he had scars on his cheeks and just who he was. They'd never seen him in the village before. They watched as he crossed the classroom and stopped in front of the desk, dropping the files on top before turning and hopping up to sit on top of the desk with his legs crossed and his hands on his knees. He grinned at them and when they saw his enlarged fangs, their eyes opened wide. He looked like a fox. The slanted eyes only made that more prominent, although foxes don't have blue eyes. "Hello class, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, your new sensei. You may address me as Naruto sensei, okay?" All the children nodded and bade him good morning. Naruto smiled at them before hopping off the desk and standing straight as an arrow, his hands behind his back. "Now that the pleasantries are out of the way, let me tell you a little about myself. I am the Jinhira for the Kyuubi no Yaka. I have a fox demon inside of me just like Kazekage-sama had inside of him. Before any of you freak out, I have the situation under control. I just want you to know that so that if any of you are going to make this a problem, leave now." He paused to see if any would leave. None did. That was a good sign. Good. We might work out all right after all. Tell me, what are the requirements to be a genin of Suna? A small girl raised her hand. Naruto nodded for her to speak. To do the henge, kawarimi, and bunshin and to also pass a written test. Naruto nodded and the girl sat down pleased with herself. That is correct. That is Suna's graduation exam. But it is not mine. The kid's eyes flew wide open and their ears perked. I don't merely mean to make you genin. I plan to make you ninja. Fully functioning ninja by the time you leave this classroom. You, in the front row, what is in that textbook? History, sir, along with theories on the lower level jutsu. Give me that. The student walked forward and handed Naruto his book. He flipped through it, made a disgusted face, and tossed it on the floor. Everyone, take your textbook and toss it into a pile. Once everyone had complied, he made some seals and burned them with a katon jutsu. The children all stared in horror. What the hell was this man thinking? If you want to study that, do it on your own time. I plan to make you children strong, stronger than the genin in Konoha, stronger than IWA, stronger than any other genin in this school. When you leave my classroom, you will be able to stomp the shit out of any student from this academy outside this classroom. Fighting amongst yourselves will not be tolerated. Am I clear? If you have an ego, if you're a fangirl or fanboy, if you're just an idiot with a chip on his shoulder, get out. I have no use for you. I was an idiot when I was a genin. I thought I had something to prove. I left the academy greener than a grasshopper's ass and thought I was king of the world. Let me tell you kids something. The world isn't fair. I'm the first to admit this. I'm a human sacrifice, kids. I've been beaten, I've been tortured, and I've nearly been killed. The ninja world is not pretty and some of you may die. I'm not trying to scare you, but that's the way the world is. Don't think being a ninja is cool, don't think it is noble. It's a job. It's a service to your village. To most you are a tool. Personally I don't believe that. Emotion can't be wiped out. It's what makes us human. I want you to know that I don't play favorites. I will be working with each and every one of you personally. This class is a team effort. If you have illusions of grandeur, if you think you're better than your classmates, get out. This is the golden rule of my class. Everyone passes or nobody passes. And we will do this over and over and over again, until everyone passes. Am I clear? Every head nodded dumbly. Naruto smiled and his smile made the children relax more. I've seen favoritism and what it can do to a team. I won't let that happen to my students. If one of your classmates is struggling, help them. It's better for you in the end. If you can't get your chakra under control, ask someone who's good with control to help you. If you need to build up your reserves, then get with someone who knows ninjutsu. If you suck at hand-to-hand combat, find a classmate who can kick your ass and work with them. That works the other way around too. Offer to help. Don't sit by idly while someone struggles. If I see you doing that, I'll kick your ass out of this class so fast, even medical jutsu won't be able to take the boot print off your cheeks. The children all laughed at that and Naruto's smile grew wider. Not to say there won't be bookwork or homework assignments. I just prefer to work on the practical things. History, to me, is a hobby. Knowing how many hairs were on the Shodaime Kazeki's ass isn't going to help you mid-battle. Knowing how to beat the shit out of your opponent will. Now I'll take questions until we have to leave. Don't tell me your name though. I don't want to know them. Why not sensei? Because then that would mean that I had a personal attachment to you, and as a sensei who is going to grind you into the ground, I'd rather not know you all personally, otherwise I might decide to go easy on you. Are you going to teach us lots of cool jutsu? I have a very limited repertoire at the moment, but I will teach you what I can. Remember kids, a ninja never stops learning. He's always learning something new, something useful. What jutsu I do know are powerful though. At one time, I had the Toad contract, but I gave it up when I left my village. What village are you from originally? I'm from Konoha. I left there for personal reasons that I won't divulge to you kids. What's the biggest toad you ever summoned? The chief toad Gamabunta. The children all gasped and began to whisper amongst themselves. Naruto cocked his head and asked what the problem was. Nothing sensei, it's just that Kazekage-sama was beaten by a boy who could summon toads during the failed invasion of Konoha. We've heard that he's friends with him now though. Naruto put on his foxiest grin and put his hands on his hips. Yeah, I whipped Gaara's ass pretty good. If the children were dumbstruck before, then they were comatose now. No way. That was you? You beat the Kaze cage. When we were children, yes. But I don't want to talk about that now. Why not? It's not my place to tell of the defeat of the Kaze cage. He's my friend and I won't belittle him by talking about things in the past that don't affect us now. Naruto looked around the room and saw that their questions were coming to a close. Any more questions? Just one. Can you show us your jutsus? Naruto grinned and walked to the door. He turned in the doorway. Let's take a trip outside real quick. Some of mine can be a bit destructive. The kids filed outside quickly and blinked against the nearly noonday sun. Naruto coughed to get their attention. I'll show you two of my favorites and after that we'll go home for the day. Putting his fingers into a familiar cross-shaped seal, he cried out, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and as many clones as there were students popped up. Naruto looked to his students and grinned. This is how I'll be teaching each of you personally. I prefer hands-on training and teaching so no one will fall behind. But sensei, they're just Bunshin. They can't help us. One of the clones frowned and walked over to the boy. Everyone watched as it raised its hand and waited for it to pass through the boy's head. Instead a smacking sound was heard and everyone looked in shock to see the boy holding his head. The clone walked back beside its brethren and smirked. As you can see, these are Kage Bunshin, not regular Bunshin. They are quite solid and have my knowledge and ability. When they are dispelled I learn everything they learned and I keep the knowledge. They're extremely useful and if I deem that everyone is worth passing and has enough chakra capacity, I shall teach it to you as a parting gift. The children seemed to be salivating at the chance to learn such a powerful jutsu. Sensei, what about the second jutsu? Ah yes, my other favorite. This is difficult to learn and I will not teach any of you this. It takes an insane amount of control and power and you simply aren't ready. Even I can't do it without the aid of a clone. He held out his right hand and a clone stepped forward. Slowly blue chakra began to form in his hand and took the shape of a sphere as the clone maintained it. Naruto ran toward a large piece of an old wall and thrust the sphere into it, blowing it to smithereens. He clapped his hands to free them of dust and walked back to the group, dismissing his clones. He turned back to the kids and ushered them back inside, ignoring the heads poking out of the windows to see what the hell was going on. Once inside the classroom, he took up his station at the desk again. Now look kids, I'm not going to lie to you. This is my first time as a teacher and I don't want to screw up. I promised Gaara that I wouldn't let him down and I intend to start with this class. Suna needs good shinobi, dependable shinobi, and this class has the potential to be one of the best ever. Take the rest of the day off and think about whether you want me as a sensei or not. I'm unorthodox, I'm brash, but if you are willing to learn, I'm willing to help you. If you'd rather wait till next year when you can have a seasoned Chunin teacher, then I won't blame you. We'll be going by ear here. We'll still have tests by the way, but that will be on things I think are important. Personally I think genin exams are a crock. I myself can't create a simple bunshin. I have too much chakra. I have a friend back home who can't use jutsus but he's still one of the best ninja I've ever met and on a good day he could kick anyone's ass from here to mist and back and never have that smile of his leave his face. We will accentuate your positives and work on your negatives. Remember this class motto is, no one is left behind. Now get out of here. I got other things to do and a lesson plan to work on. The children filed out as if in a daze and Naruto left after them, wondering if he was doing the right thing. As soon as the door was closed, a genjutsu dropped and the Sand siblings stood in the corner. Temari turned to Gaara and saw that he was deep in thought. So? What do you two think? Kankura took up a thinking pose that looked unnatural on him, but this was an unorthodox thing to begin with. I think he'll either make or break these kids. Naruto was always a do-or-die kind of person. Personally, I think the academy has been due for a shake-up like this for years. What do you think, Temari? I think he'll do fine. I actually like his approach. It reminds me of Baki-sensei. Gaara, what do you think? Gaara didn't answer for several minutes. He just stood there with his arms crossed until that small smile made it onto his face and his siblings stared at him waiting for his answer. I hope Naruto bakes another dessert tonight. I seem to have acquired a sweet tooth. He disappeared in a swirl of sand, leaving two baffled jounin. After the shock wore off, Temari smiled at Kankura as they walked out of the room. He'll do just fine. And I hope he bakes a cake tonight too. That boy's a damn good cook. Kankura took a sip out of his canteen. Then why don't you rope him and take him out? Temari looked up as they walked and waited until Kankura took another sip of water before answering. I just might. I saw him in boxers, remember? He has a great ass. Poor Kankura nearly died from choking. Naruto did indeed bake a cake that night and everyone was very appreciative. He retired early to his room to think about what he'd done that day. He laid on the bed with one arm on his forehead, staring at the ceiling. Had he done the right thing in telling those kids the truth? Had he been too harsh in telling them the ugliness of the world? He sighed and rolled over to look at the clock. It was late and he needed to get to sleep. He rolled back onto his back and sighed again. I guess I'll find out in the morning. Walking to class was somewhat of a chore for Naruto. It seems that people had heard of his speech to his students and the results were mixed. Most of the ones who he assumed were parents, or people who were the age of the parents of his students, gave him dirty looks. The older folks and ranked ninja gave him appreciative looks. Apparently, being spontaneous and brash was a double-edged sword when it came to teaching. At least they didn't outright hate him. Walking peacefully was another new experience to him. In fact, most greeted him or gave him a polite nod. Having the Kaze Cage as a friend was a good benefit apparently. He thought back to the night before and to Mary. She had smiled at him more than she usually did and had destroyed his dessert with passion, even growling at Gaara when he tried to take the last piece. Naruto smiled in spite of himself. It wasn't every day you saw Gaara startled like that. He stepped into the school and greeted everyone he met with a smile. One of his fellow teachers walked up to him and stuck out her hand. Hello there. I'm Urameshi Kari. My class is the one down from yours. I have to say, your little demonstration yesterday was quite a shocker. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Urameshi-san? Kari, please, and that's a good thing. It's nice to have a teacher that the students actually look up to and don't disrespect. Look up to? Heh, if they look up to me, they don't know me yet. My students will hate me by the time I'm through with them. Why's that? Because of the regimen I'm going to put them through. I'm sorry to cut our conversation short, Kari-san, but I have to get to class and so do you. I look forward to speaking with you again. Kari watched as he paced on down the hall, the heels of his shoes thumping against the wooden floor. Interesting guy. Naruto walked into his classroom and took up his position at the desk again. He was pleasantly surprised to see that all his students had shown back up. They were indeed a surprising bunch. He'd expected at least 4 or 5 to not come back. He smiled at them and walked to the blackboard. Good morning, class. In unison, they all chanted, Good morning, Naruto-sensei. His smile grew a little wider. Naruto-sensei. Yeah, he liked the sound of that. He faced them again and put his hands behind his back. Now do you all remember what I spoke of yesterday? Good, good. Today will be our first official day of training. I will be with all of you and will do an assessment of your skills. But first, let's all go outside. Follow me. Opening the door, he turned to see them still in their seats and raised an eyebrow in annoyance. Move your lazy asses and get outside. They all squeaked and flew past him. Chuckling to himself, he followed them out and found them in a line, facing the building. Ah, excellent form. I'm glad that you all know how to stand at attention. Now, to begin, you're all going to do 5 laps around Suna. Once you're done, we'll begin with a few light calisthenics and then you'll sit as I lecture on a topic. Once I'm finished, and it'll be brief since I hate to sit still, we'll begin working with each of you individually. This will be our regimen for the mornings. Now let's go. Follow me. He heard little to no grumbling as he jogged away. That was good. It seemed that these kids took him seriously. He smirked as he led them on their run around the village, which he was sure would wear them all out. What they didn't know was that their training had already begun. This was to build their endurance. The light calisthenics when they got back were to stretch their bodies out before they got into the heavy stuff. The lecture was because he hated to read textbooks. If his former senseis had only used the approach he was going to use, he wouldn't have been half as pathetic as he had been. After about 2 hours, their run was through. Many students looked about ready to collapse, but Naruto was proud to see a gleam in their eyes, a look that was filled with determination. He led them through some jumping jacks and stretches and then had them sit in a semicircle around him as he began that morning's lecture. Now I'm sure most of you are tired, and you rightfully should be. Just remember that all of you are 8 years old and are a beginning class. The fact that none of you dropped out of our run speaks wonders about you. I'm proud of all of you. As we go on in the years to come, it will grow easier and we will set new goals to supersede those we have surpassed. I want you to listen carefully as I explain something to you. Despite their tiredness, he was pleased to see them all lean eagerly in for his lesson. Do all of you remember what I told you about shinobi being emotionless tools yesterday? Good, you all remember. I don't believe that, not one bit. Emotions can help you in a fight as much as hinder you. It's simply a matter of knowing when to use them. Anger can blind you, but it can also help you gain strength to win. Sadness can burden you, but it can also drive you to succeed. Do not forsake your emotions, for that is folly. I, myself, am a very emotional person. I seem to be driven by them. But I use them to my advantage. Tell me, class, what makes a person strong? The answers ranged from ninjutsu to muscles, and Naruto sighed in annoyance. That is a typical answer. It's true that those things can make you stronger. But they will never allow you to break the glass ceiling and become a great ninja like emotions can. The truth to gaining strength, the real truth, is that to become strong you must protect your precious people. When they are in danger, you can overcome any obstacle to save them. I was told this by a very wise person, who died before their time. I took his words to heart and hold them closely to this day. Naruto-sensei, who was this person? Naruto smiled sadly and looked toward the scorching sun. He was my first friend, someone who I could identify with. His name was Haku, and he was the apprentice of the demon of the bloody mist, Mamakai Zabuza. Haku was a kind, gentle soul, and loved his master greatly. He would have done anything to help him achieve his dream, and that is what made him strong. But even great ninja fall prey to emotion, and in the end, even though we were enemies, he couldn't kill me. His heart was too soft, too kind. And yet, he got strong because of Zabuza. Haku was a child thrown away. He came from Mist, where bloodlines were despised and anyone who had one was killed. His mother was from a clan whose line allowed them to manipulate ice. His father killed his mother and then tried to kill him, but Haku slaughtered his father in a moment of panic. He wasn't wanted. Then Zabuza found him, and wanted him for the very thing that everyone else hated him for. Zabuza was not a good man, but he took in an urchin and nurtured him, fed him, clothed him, gave him a purpose. He was precious to Haku, even if it was only for those reasons. With him Haku felt wanted. That's not to say Zabuza loved him. Haku was a tool to him, that's what he told Haku and himself. But deep inside, Haku was the son he never had, and it pained him to see Haku die. The day Haku died, snow fell in a land that had never seen snow, and Zabuza died, wishing with all his heart to see the boy in the next life. I hope he made it there. I hope those two are together, and I hope they are happy. Purity. That's what Haku was, pure as the snow, and with the snow came a pure start for a country on the brink of decline. Naruto looked at his students and sniffed. I hope you all take Haku's words to heart. Shinobi are not gods, we are men and women, flesh and blood, and we take life and we give life. We love and we hate, we kill and we protect. But never forget that to become strong, you must protect those precious to you. If you aren't strong enough to defeat someone, then it's because you haven't found someone precious enough to you yet. When you go home today, I want you to think about who is precious to you. Tell those people you love them every day, because as a ninja, you never know when your last day will be. Think of those you will leave behind and honor them every day. I'm an orphan. I had no one until I was nearly 12 years old. But here, in Suna, I hope to forge a loving relationship with someone. I want to find precious people here. I have 3 already, but I want more. Love is meant to be spread, hatred is meant to be contained. Never take your life for granted. This is the lesson for today. Think about your goals as a ninja, and before that goal, make this your golden rule. Protect those precious to you. If you do that, you will never fail, no matter what you do. And you will all be splendid shinobi. Naruto looked out over his students and saw that they were all deep in thought. He couldn't believe how good teaching felt. It made his heart swell to know that he was molding these children, that his teachings would guide them in life. Clapping his hands to get their attention, he summoned enough clones so that each child had one. Today we will work and see where your chakra control is. Once that is found, we will begin exercises to build up your reserves. We'll work on taijutsu tomorrow. I'm not the best at genjutsu, but I'll find a genjutsu specialist and we'll have them help us. Now then, let's split up. The children all picked a clone and spread out. Some were passable with chakra control, while others were abysmal. A couple actually had rather decent control, but he chalked that up to small reserves. Once it was found where their control level was, Naruto called them all back. The kids stood in a line, awaiting further orders. You'll be happy to know we're going back inside for this. We don't have the necessary area to work out here. Now follow me back inside. Once back inside, Naruto turned to the children. Now we're going to work on your control. You're going to climb these walls, with no hands. Many children looked at him like he was stupid and a couple scoffed. Naruto threw his head back and laughed. Don't worry, that was my reaction to this as well. I started on trees, but unfortunately, we don't have that luxury, at least not yet. Perhaps I can do something about that in the future. For now, watch me. The students watched in awe as he walked up the wall and then across the ceiling, standing above them, looking down. This will both help build your chakra reserves and build your control. Now then, to avoid any holes in the wall, I want you all to lay on the floor and put your feet on the wall. There won't be any running starts, so you'll have to concentrate. Focus the chakra to the bottom of your feet and place your foot on the wall. When you think you have it, gently place your foot on the wall and see what happens. If you feel it begin to stick, and you will feel it, then put more weight on that foot and concentrate on the other while maintaining that level of chakra output. Try to match it in the foot not stuck to the wall and continue onward. The object is to get at least halfway up the wall today. If you can't, don't worry. I'll help you. The children all lay down and as expected, those with small reserves made it up within several minutes. They could not, however, maintain it for long before flipping to the floor and lying down again. The ones with bad control struggled. They would put a foot on the wall and test, but couldn't seem to get the right level. The clones stood over them, encouraging and giving instructions. As lunchtime rolled around, every student was able to at least get off the floor. They looked discouraged, but as the clones poofed away, Naruto eased their fears. Don't worry about getting it on the first day. I didn't learn this until after I was a genin. It's not something that most people learn until later. I want you guys prepared though. Go to lunch and after you come back, we'll start on another lesson. Be back in an hour. Naruto walked into Gaara's office just a few minutes past noon and saw that the redhead had a table against the wall laden with fruits and meats. Drooling from the mouth, he headed towards the table only to have a wall of sand appear in front of him. It's rude not to announce that you're here before diving in. Fine. I'm here. Can I please eat now? I'm starving. Look at me, I'm wasting away. I highly doubt that. Bring me a plate over here when you come, I need to finish reading this document. Naruto piled the plates with as much meat and fruit as he could carry and made his way to Gaara's desk. He swept some documents out of the way and sat Gaara's plate down in front of him, receiving a grunt of appreciation. Or at least he thought it was appreciation. Munching happily on his meal, he waited for Gaara to finish before striking up a conversation. Grumbling under his breath, Gaara signed the paper with a flourish and put it in his outbox. He grabbed a slice of cantaloupe and sighed contentedly. So, how go things at the school? It's all right. The kids are uncommonly sedate and willing to learn. I don't understand it. Perhaps it was your little speech you gave them. You heard about that? Gaara nodded and reached for a slice of ham. From numerous sources. I'd say you scared the stupidity right out of them. That's a good thing though, so don't go getting mopey. It doesn't suit you. Well, I just hope I'm doing the right thing. Have any parents complained about me yet? 1. He's a grandfather and legal guardian of one of your students. He remembers me way back when I was still a bloodthirsty killer and doesn't like people like you or I. He's stuck in the past and wanted to pull his grandchild out. Of course, I told him where he could go if he didn't like it. He caved with little difficulty. You used your sand on him, didn't you? People should not be so foolish as to believe that just because I am young, that I am a pushover as cause a cage. I don't take being told what to do very kindly, no matter if they are my elder or not. You still shouldn't threaten people, Gaara. It'll only reinforce his opinion of us. Gaara sighed and looked at his friend as he munched on some grapes. You're too kind for your own good, Naruto. It'll be the death of you someday. Perhaps. I'm sorry, Gaara, but I have to return to class. My clone says that the students returned earlier than I thought. Very well. I shall see you this evening perhaps, if my duties don't keep me here all night. All right. Later. As Naruto walked back to the classroom, he wondered what he could show these kids. He decided that starting with the basics was the best thing to do. Since he'd already made them do control exercises today, they should be able to do henge with no problem. Nodding to himself that that was indeed the correct path to follow, he walked inside to find his classroom in utter chaos. The children were talking and laughing amongst themselves loudly. He gritted his teeth. The clone had dismissed itself prematurely. Next time he'd leave 2 clones to avoid this. The kids never noticed as he smoothly glided to the desk and leaned against it, his arms folded against his chest. The more he listened to the pointless banter, the more irritated he became. He thought of using his former sensei's big head jutsu but decided to test the theory that Gaara had that these children actually respected him. As quietly as he could he uttered 2 words. Be still. As if those were magic words, all the kids turned in their desks and faced forward. It was amazing, the power he held over these children. Only Kano Amaru had listened to him with such rapture and attention. He coughed into his hand and looked over all of them. We'll begin with our last lesson of the day. You will all learn to perform henge. I will situate you each with a clone and it will show you the necessary seals to perform this jutsu. This is a rudimentary jutsu, as are all the academy graduating standards. However, henge and kawarami can save your life if need be. They cost relatively little chakra and higher level shinobi still use these E-class jutsu to this day. In fact, henge was my favorite technique for quite a while. Allow me to give you a demonstration. Naruto put his hands in the proper seal and transformed into Gaara. In the Kazekige's monotone drawl, he explained the exercise. To complete the jutsu, to make it totally effective, it helps if you learn the mannerisms and voice of your preferred target for transformation. If you can replicate everything down to the tiniest twitch of a finger, only a genjutsu master or someone with a jujutsu could tell you weren't the real article. Now then, scatter out around the classroom and prepare to learn. The children were all assigned a clone and began to perform the necessary seals while Naruto sat at his desk and wrote some things down. These kids would become the model for what an academy student should be. He'd make sure of that. After nearly a half hour, one of his clones poofed out, signifying that a student had completed the jutsu. Naruto glanced up to the girl and motioned for her to come before his desk. So you've completed the exercise. Hi sensei. Indeed. Perform the henge for me. Transform into me. The girl made the necessary seals and turned into a perfect copy of Naruto. He nodded and stood up, making his way around the desk. A few more examples and I'll assign you a new task. I want you to transform into what I do. The girl nodded her head and Naruto transformed into Gaara and she followed suit. He turned into Baki and she did that as well. He poofed into Tamari and the girl did it mostly well but the hair was slightly discolored. Naruto undid the illusion and sat back down in his chair. You have a high degree of control but that is mostly due to low reserves. You performed very well, but when you turned into Tamari, you discolored her hair, signifying your chakra was nearly out. Do not perform any more jutsu for the rest of class and let your reserves fill back up. Help out the other students and learn from their mistakes. Watch what they do and give suggestions. Dismissed. The girl bowed and walked over to a boy who seemed to be struggling. Naruto's clone stepped back and watched the two. The boy seemed grateful for the extra help and soon was able to perform the jutsu with minimal difficulty. Naruto smiled at his students and continued with his paperwork. Soon, the day was over and Naruto called for the students to return to their seats. Many flopped down, breathing heavily while his clones dispelled. He walked around in front of the desk and leaned against it. Very good. You all did well today. I want you to go home and do as you please this evening with one exception. I want you to try to trick a family member by using the henge. If you can't perform the henge all that well, then practice with your control. Now then, get out of here. I have better things to do than stare at your ugly mugs. The students beamed at the praise and gave him a high sensei before leaving. Naruto shuffled his papers and made as if to leave when he saw the woman from that morning standing in the doorway, leaning against the jamb. He waved to her and said hello. You're quite the unorthodox one, aren't you, Naruto-san? I was walking by and saw the students all laid on the floor with a copy of you standing over them. Tell me, what were you doing? That's a trade secret. How is your class? My class is fine. They're coming along quite nicely, although they hate my lectures. They say history is boring. I agree. I gave my class a lecture on emotions and shinobi today. They actually seemed interested in what I had to say. It's quite an experience molding minds. Indeed. Well, I suppose I've kept you long enough. I shall see you tomorrow, I suppose. Good evening, Naruto-san. Goodbye, Kari-san. After another spectacular dinner, Naruto sat on the roof of the compound, staring out over the desert. He was lost in thought again, a strange occurrence considering who he was. He had been reading one of his father's scrolls on jutsus and was eager to try them, but between the academy and cooking for his housemates, he didn't have any time left. He sighed and looked up into the stars. He supposed even the stars could feel lost sometimes. He heard the crunch of a shoe behind him and didn't bother to turn around. Her scent carried on the wind. Hey Tamari. Need something? She settled down beside him and pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. No, I don't need anything. I just wanted to see if you wanted some company. You've been unusually quiet lately. I've had a lot to think about lately. That's true. I don't think I've asked you yet how you like it here. I like it very much. It's less green than Konoha, but the people are nicer to me. Besides, if I can make it work, it'll be a lot greener around here someday. She looked at him like he had two heads. What does that mean? He gave her a foxy grin that showed his fangs. That's a secret. You'll be the first to find out though if it works, I promise. Humph, everything's a secret with you. I heard about your teaching regimen today. Word gets out fast, huh? With those gossipy little brats of yours it does. They're all so excited to have a sensei that's not afraid to tell them the truth. Word around the campfire is that you have quite a few pairs of eyes on you, both professionally and otherwise. Naruto cocked an eyebrow and looked at her quizzically. What's that mean? She smirked at him and looked at the stars. That's a secret. Look who's being a hypocrite. You get onto me for being secretive and yet here you are keeping secrets. Sounds like a double standard to me. Well, you know the exchange for secrets. I'll tell mine if you tell yours. Nah, I can live without your secret. Besides, we'll both find out eventually what the other meant. Asshole. Ah, you love it. The two sat in relative silence for what seemed like forever. Both marveling at how at ease they were around the other. Comfortable silence. Didn't someone say something about that sometime or other? Soon enough Tamari sighed and rested her chin on her arms. I have to go to Konoha tomorrow to give them our reports and get theirs. Anything you'd like me to tell the old lady? Just that I'm doing all right and that I miss her. If you see a one-armed pervert, tell him I miss him too. Tamari laughed softly and turned her attention back to the desert. It looked so different at night, not at all the scalding, torturous wasteland it was during the day. She looked over at her companion and took in his facial features. He'd grown since she last saw him again. He was taller and that baby fat was disappearing rapidly. He'd gotten more handsome. Stronger too. Suddenly Kankura's suggestion didn't sound so crazy. It might be fun to have a guy like Naruto as a boyfriend. He'd be a challenge to her, unafraid to bear her judgment and punishment. Hell, she'd bashed him over the head numerous times in the past days he'd stayed at the compound and he just brushed them off and kept picking with her. With that thought in mind, Tamari made a decision. She was the daughter of a former Kazekage, the sister of the current Kazekage, and one of the most powerful jounin in the military. Having a boy who wasn't afraid of her and was stronger than her as a boyfriend was a damn good idea. It was just a bonus that he was good looking and smarter than he let on. She jumped to her feet, the sudden motion startling Naruto. When he asked her what was wrong, she merely smiled down at him and held out her hand. He took it and she lifted him up. Say Naruto, you ever had a girlfriend? Taken aback by the abrupt question, he managed to stammer out a no. How about dates? Ever been on a date? Another no. Wanna go on one with me? If the boy was stuttering earlier, he was speechless now. A beautiful, deadly kunoichi asking him on a date? What alternate dimension had he stumbled into? Tamari took his silence as hesitation and growled, grabbing him by the shirt collar. Look Naruto, I'm the daughter of a Kaze Kage and the sister of the current one. I'm used to getting what I want and you're no exception. Now I want you to take me on a date and you're going to like it. This little proclamation snapped Naruto out of his muddled thoughts and brought back some of that bravado he was famous for. He narrowed his eyes and spoke in a haughty voice. And since when have I cared who someone was related to or what their name was? You don't scare me. Tamari smirked at him and let go of his collar. That's what I like about you Naruto, blunt and to the point. When I get back I expect you to take me out to dinner and a movie. And you can't be late since we live in the same house. It's brilliant. I don't believe I ever agreed to this little escapade. Tamari's smirk grew wider, if that was possible, and sauntered over to him, her hips swinging seductively. Naruto gulped when her hand found its way to his cheek and pressed against his face as she fluttered her eyelashes. But Naruto, I wanted to go on a date with you. Please? Pretty please. She did a victory dance in her head when the poor boy nodded dumbly and she released the hold on his cheek, patting it a couple of times. See, that wasn't so hard now was it? You're a good guy Naruto and I expect to be treated like a queen. Naruto smiled and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. He couldn't believe he let himself be suckered like that. Is there any other way to treat a lady? Tamari smiled softly before going back downstairs to her room. For your sake there better not be another way. You know what I'll do to you afterwards, and that's after I make you promise on a makeup date. She smiled sweetly while she gave her threat and walked downstairs to her bedroom. Naruto sighed in defeat and lay back again to stare at the stars. It seemed a few winked at him, as if they were laughing merrily at his predicament. He walked downstairs and was just about to open his door when Tamari poked her head out of hers. Oh, before I forget, you have to dress nice too. We're going to a really nice restaurant. Naruto started to protest before she shut the door and went back to sleep. He grimaced and opened his door, locking it behind him. As he lay down on the bed, he could have sworn he heard the puppet master next door snickering through his wall. Damned eavesdroppers. He picked up his mother's scroll on gardening again and smiled. If he could get a plot of land and the jutsu worked, he'd plant a lot of flowers. Wonder what Tamari's favorite flower is. Naruto had begun the day by getting to the academy ahead of the students and watching as they filed in while he stood upside down on the ceiling. Being spontaneous as an instructor was pivotal to his approach. If he did the unexpected, his students would never be bored, always wondering what he was going to do next. With that in mind he waited and watched as all his students faced the front, waiting for him to come in. Smiling at their willingness to learn, he cut off the chakra to his feet and dropped to the floor. To say the children were surprised to see their teacher fall from the sky was an understatement. Necks immediately cracked upwards to see where the hole in the roof was that he had come through. Not finding one, their eyes asked the unspoken question. Naruto chuckled and put his hands behind his back. Well then, good morning class. Good morning Naruto-sensei. Good to see you all. Did you all do your assignment last night? Heads nodded, indicating that most were able to pull it off. Some heads hung in defeat, since they hadn't managed to trick their families. Naruto scowled and clapped his hands. Now, we won't be having any heads hanging in my classroom. You're all beginners and if you didn't do it the first time, keep trying until you do. I don't ask for anything other than you try. Now then, I'm going to make clones and I want you to show them that you can henge into at least 3 different shapes. If you have any trouble, they will assist you. He quickly made the clones and they began to watch the children. A couple struggled and were straightened out soon enough. The problem was either too much or too little chakra. Once their little problem was stomped out, Naruto clapped his hands and the class faced him again. Okay, we're going for our morning run now. Everyone outside and do 5 laps around the village. The children complied again and ran around the village. They finished their run and stood in a line, some puffing, some huffing, all tired. Naruto led them through their calisthenics and told them to sit. All right kiddies. Today, we're going to be doing taijutsu. Now, personally, I have no style. I'm a brawler by nature. I go in and I try to beat the crap out of the other guy. If I get hit, I get hit. But that's me. I'm going to be taking notes on you. I want you all to pick a partner and spar, light contact only. Many of you are from families of ninja and I'm sure you've been shown some form of martial art. Maybe soon, I can get an assistant that can help with taijutsu forms. We'll worry about that later though. Now, split up. The kids broke into pairs and began to spar, with a Naruto for each couple. This continued until lunchtime, when Naruto went to Gaara's office. It was quickly becoming a habit for the Jinhuriki. With lunchtime over, Naruto motioned for the kids to lie on the floor and try to walk up the wall again. The next day would be covering the hand seals. He'd only shown them how to make the henge, he hadn't shown them the seals and the proper usage of them. He'd rectify that tomorrow. He sighed and looked out over his students. I wonder how Mary is doing. Said Kunoichi had finally arrived in Konoha and was walking to the Hokage's office. Konoha was no longer one of her favorite places. This was a village that had turned its back on one of her most treasured people. Naruto was a savior to the people of Suna. He had done so much for Gaara and had asked for nothing in return. The people of Suna, well most of them, treated him like a hero. Here in Konoha, he was a reminder of the past, a reviled thing no matter what he did. Hell, Gaara had killed people, his own people, in the past and the citizens of Suna mostly forgave him. Temari nodded absent-mindedly to the people as she passed. Her thoughts weren't with Konoha at the moment. A sudden realization made her cringe. She'd have to meet all of Naruto's friends at some point and the only ones she didn't mind were that Hyuga girl and Shikamaru. The thought of the lazy Chiryunin brought a smirk to her face. To think she used to have a small crush on the lazy ass. She sighed as she came before the door of the Hokage Tower. She wasn't looking forward to this. Tsunade had been worried ever since Naruto left. She'd been so relieved when she received Gaara's note that he had arrived safely, but had yet to hear anything else about her favorite blonde. He'd been gone a little over 2 weeks and she was already tired of her job. She hadn't realized how much the boy made her appreciate what she did. His desire to be in her position made her continue on every day. Without him there to prod her though, she simply didn't have the drive or motivation. Perhaps it was time to pass it on to someone else. She laid her head on her desk and sighed heavily. Maybe she could move to Suna too. Temari opened the door after receiving the okay from Shizuan. She had been expecting Tsunade to be asleep, as she'd found her like that several times. She was not expecting to find a depressed woman sighing into the veneer of her table. Temari coughed into her hand and shut the door behind her. Tsunade raised her head off the desk, her vision obscured by a paper stuck to her forehead. She growled and grabbed the offending object, balling it up and throwing it across the room. Temari smiled at her childishness and took a seat. Come now Tsunade-sama, did the paperwork really deserve that? Tsunade glared at the kunoichi in front of her, trying to melt her head with her stare. She hadn't wanted to be disturbed by anyone and had thought she had told Shizuan that. It was then that it dawned on her that Temari could give her an update on Naruto. Her face lit up and she smiled at Temari, slightly frightening the other blonde due to the mood swing. How is Naruto? Is he doing all right? How's Suna taking him? He hasn't done anything stupid, has he? Temari sat there dumbfounded for a moment. She'd known that the Hokage liked Naruto, but to the extent of wanting to talk to him above diplomacy? Who'd have thought? Don't you believe that we should talk about business first, Tsunade-sama? Screw business. I want to know how Naruto is doing. I could care less if this village burnt to the ground at the moment. Temari gasped and looked hard at the older woman. Tsunade-sama. That is most improper for one of your station. Tsunade sighed and leaned back in her chair. Temari, please, just tell me how he's doing. Temari smirked and suppressed a giggle. She couldn't wait to tell the old bat this. We have him teaching at the academy. Silence. Total silence. Silence from Tsunade. Silence from an eavesdropping Shizuan. Silence from the hidden Umbu in the corner. The only thought going through the three's mind at the moment was, what the hell are you all thinking? You can't put him with children. He'll have them all being perverted within a month. Temari snorted and crossed her legs. Oh please Tsunade-sama, you don't believe that. Besides, believe it or not, he's actually an excellent teacher. He's even got the brats working on walking up walls as we speak. The second day he taught them all henge. And the lectures he gives, if I'd had him as a teacher, I'd have wanted to go to school every day. Tsunade sat back, thoroughly confused. Lectures? Naruto? No way in hell. He's way too impatient to talk about any subject for too long. It's true. In fact, he's really passionate about things. He burned all the class history books the first day. Said if they wanted to learn about history, do it on their own time. He'd be teaching them how to be ninja. His first lecture was on emotions and the use of them in battle and life. Tsunade sat there, a disbelieving look on her face. Finally, after many stone-faced moments, she called for Shizuan. The brunette peeked in cautiously and asked what she wanted. I want you to gather all Naruto's friends, the council, and the Jounin senseis. If this is true, then they have to hear this. Besides, this way Tamari won't have to repeat it a billion times. Tamari smiled at the older woman's deviousness. This wasn't for Tamari's benefit, it was for Tsunade's. This was her way of rubbing it in their faces that they had made a damn fine man an outcast amongst his peers and had driven him away from his home village to a place where he was appreciated. To a village where the children looked up to and respected him. He'd been in Suna less than 2 weeks and already was becoming quite the talk-about subject. Almost immediately, Jiraiya had appeared. If something was said about his apprentice, then by God, he was going to hear it. Tamari watched as they all filed in, the young, the old, the teachers, the detractors, and the friends. They all lined against the wall and suddenly, she felt vulnerable. She was about to talk about a boy that she only knew in passing before and as a friend and housemate now. In truth, she knew very little about the mystery that was Uzumaki Naruto, but she wanted to know. Oh, how she wanted to know. She smiled inside her mind. Now, she'd have all the time in the world. She faced the Hokage when the older woman coughed into her hand. Now then Tamari, let's begin again. What is Naruto's capacity in Suna? This ought to be good for a few laughs. Thought Tsunade. Naruto's capacity is that of a Chunin school teacher. A cricket would not have dared to break the silence that permeated the air in that office. Not until one Nara Shikamaru snorted and gave his opinion in his usual slow drawl. Uzumaki Naruto, a teacher? PFFFTT, that'll be the day. Now what does he really do? Shikamaru, he really is a teacher, and from what I've seen, he's one of the best we've ever had. The kids love him. Shikamaru knew then that it wasn't a lie, it wasn't a joke. Tamari was simply incapable of delivering a joke when in the presence of so many important people. She was all business, although her eyes held a mirthful glint, like she was enjoying this. So troublesome. Ahem, now that we have that out of the way. Tamari, continue with your analysis. Thank you Hokage-sama. Naruto is coming along nicely from what I've seen. The people of Suna have taken to him very well and so have his students. He gave them a lecture the first day about the dangers of being a ninja and gave them a chance to wait for another teacher. All of the students were back the next day. He's currently teaching them the basic ninja techniques and advanced chakra control. Sakura spoke up when chakra control was mentioned. That wasn't Naruto's strong suit. What do you mean by advanced? How old are his students? He's teaching them to walk up walls. And they're 8. He has a beginning class. This caused a slight uproar among those present, particularly the council. How could the people of Suna let that boy teach their children? He wasn't fit to do anything but missions. Even his friends seemed to doubt his abilities. Tamari and Tsunade were fast becoming sick of it. Enough. Quiet down, all of you. Continued Tamari. Naruto is a teacher and he's a damn fine one. I believe that his crop of genin will be some of the best to ever come out of the academy. His teaching style is just as unorthodox as he is and he has the full support of my brother. But enough about his job. You're all here to find out how he is doing as a citizen, no doubt. Naruto currently lives in my family's compound with me and Kankura. He's trying to find a plot of land though, to build a house for himself. The guy currently is the resident cook for me and my brothers. A deadpan look was her answer. Shizuan, who had seen the boy's eating habits, decided to speak up. Cooking? Cooking was never one of Naruto's strong points. Well, I'd love to see him make it a strong point, because what he cooks is goddamn delicious. The desserts, oh my god, the cakes. If relationships were built solely off sweets, I'd have married that boy a long time ago. Tsunade snorted and tried to hold back her laughter. Seeing a strong jounin like Tamari about to wet herself over cake was quite a sight indeed. Tamari looked startled, and blushed prettily before continuing with her assessment. Yes, well, anyway, he's quite a guy. All he does, besides teaching, is study and try to find new methods of helping the students. Homura stepped forward and harumphed into his hand. Tsunade still hadn't forgiven the old fart for running her Naruto off. If it weren't for him and the rest of the council, her favorite blonde would still be causing mischief in Konoha instead of teaching brats in Suna. Hell, he could have done that here. Tell me, Tamari-san. What is your opinion of Uzumaki Naruto? A personal opinion, not a professional one. Tamari sat and thought for a moment. As stated before, she didn't know much of Naruto, except that he was strong, kind, and was her brother's best friend. But she would get to know him better. She turned and flashed the group behind her a grin. I just know he's Naruto. I'll tell you more after my date with him. Several of the kunoichi in the room nearly cried out in protest. The guys all sat in disbelief, Shikamaru chief among them. Tsunade and Jiraiya seemed to get the most satisfaction out of the situation. Kakashi had a discernible look on his face, but from the mask or complete apathy, Tamari couldn't tell. Hinata looked as if she was about to cry and Sakura looked despondent and slightly angry. Well, from what Tamari had heard, the Pinkette had had more than enough chances and the Hyuga was just too shy to act on hers. Too bad for them. Their loss, her gain. I think that is all I will tell you of Naruto for the time being. There is no need to tell you anything else other than he seems to be flourishing in Suna. That's all. Tsunade, seeing that she would get nothing else out of the girl in front of the crowd, dismissed them with a wave of her hand. Many left grumbling, dissatisfied with the explanation they had been given. Hinata approached Tamari before she left and bowed to the blonde. Please take care of Naruto-kun. He deserves to be happy. She left without a look back, leaving a stunned Tsunade and Tamari. The girl never showed initiative in anything, so that show of concern for Naruto, in public no less, was something new. Still, it was refreshing to Tamari to see that some were actually concerned about her housemate and weren't indifferent or outright hostile. She turned back to the Hokage with a smile on her face. Do you think my answers were satisfactory for them? Not in the least. Now, you are going to tell Jiraiya and me what he's actually been up to. I know that was the abridged version. Tamari spent the rest of the evening telling the two Sunin what their younger counterpart was up to. They laughed at her stories about mealtime at the compound and silently praised Naruto for trying to make ninja instead of genin. Tsunade was not happy about his desire to pass on his Kage Bunshin, but didn't think he would in the end anyway. Academy students simply didn't have the chakra capacity for the jutsu. Jiraiya was quite proud of his student and made a point in his mind to visit him soon to see the fledgling teacher for himself. That would be a hell of a sight, Naruto preaching about ninja code and jutsus to a bunch of starry-eyed brats. He snickered under his breath, making the two blondes face him, wondering what the hell he was laughing about. He waved his hand dismissively. I was just imagining Naruto as a teacher. It still makes me laugh since he wasn't exactly a model academy student. Tsunade chuckled as well, but Tamari frowned. Didn't these people have any faith in Naruto? Seriously, he wasn't a bad teacher. Don't laugh at him. He's actually a really good teacher and the kids respect him, which doesn't happen often in academies. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow and smirked at the girl. Oh? Getting mighty defensive of my student, aren't you? I happen to know that he's a moron, and as for your motion that he can cook, I sure as hell never saw it during our training trip. Now Jiraiya did not get to where he is by being stupid. He's quite devious and not above pushing buttons to get information. And Tamari made such an easy target. He is not stupid. And for your information, he's a wonderful cook, much better than my brothers or me. His cakes are so good I ate one by myself and had a tummy ache for the rest of. She trailed off at the end and glared at the two older people, one who was guffawing without shame, the other who was biting her lip, trying not to laugh at the poor girl. Tsunade was able to rein in her laughter, just barely, when Tamari huffed and crossed her arms like a child. Now, Tamari, don't pout. We were just teasing you. Although, it seems you've fallen prey to Naruto's natural charms. Natural charms. Tsunade smirked and folded her hands in front of her face. Why, yes. It's the same reason Hinata found him irresistible for years. He just has a way with people when you actually get to know him. If you look beyond his bubbly exterior and see that he's actually an insecure individual who just wants to be loved, it makes knowing him all the more fulfilling, because you're helping him just by being there. Tamari sat and pondered on that. It was true that the more time she spent with Naruto, the more he opened up to her. But that was everybody in general. She cocked an eyebrow in surprise when the two older ninja in front of her got serious all of a sudden. As far as your date with Naruto, let me make it clear that if you intend to harm him in any way or get his hopes up and then dash them like glass on rocks, we will personally end you. Do you understand? Temari nodded dumbly. Bit overprotective, aren't you? Not in the least. That boy is my godchild, and even though I'm not the best parental figure, I still try to look after him. Jiraiya gave her a perverted leer and Temari was immediately wary. Although I must say, the boy has impeccable taste. You are a delicious young thing. Once Jiraiya's screams couldn't be heard over the distance Tsunade had flung him, she turned back to her desk and put her face in her hands. Why, oh why, do I put up with that idiot in this village? Temari could only nod in silent agreement. After nearly a week in Konoha, the kunoichi was happy to get back to her native land. She loved the atmosphere of Konoha. It was peaceful and the scents of the different flowers were intoxicating, but the winds of the desert and the warmth of the sun on her skin always made her feel at home. She wondered idly as she walked what the rest of her bunch was up to. Gaara was more than likely up to his ears in paperwork, Kankura was probably playing with his dolls, and Naruto should have been able to teach the children all about hand signs by now and maybe gotten them started on kawarimi. Her smile widened when she remembered that she had a date with him. She looked at the position of the sun and it was still early morning. At her rate of travel, she'd arrive back in Suna in the morning. If she was lucky, maybe she could catch one of Naruto's lectures and see how he was still doing with the students. Listening to those lectures of his was a good way to pass the time. The boy had such a hypnotic voice and the way he passionately made sure the kids understood was so cool. Yeah, she'd definitely try to catch his lecture. As she sat in her hotel room, in the town right outside the Suna border, she wondered about her past life and why she'd never had a love interest. It hadn't been for lack of wanting, but with Gaara's reputation she'd never had a guy brave enough to approach her. Shikamaru did, but that was purely out of duty and he knew that Naruto could stop Gaara if he tried anything. Her reputation as a tough bitch hadn't helped either, but then, you garner that when you're a Suna kunoichi. It just comes with the headband. She sighed when she thought of her past. Everything she had at the moment was thanks to that blonde idiot and he didn't think anything of it. He was so clueless as to just how much he changed people he met. To him, Gaara was just another person that was lonely. He wasn't a soulless killer, he was just another who had been driven to the brink of insanity and needed someone to help him. But that was everyone he came across. Naruto was totally incapable of helping himself, however. He lived to make others happy. That thought made her frown. He was the epitome of the Jinhira kiss. He sacrificed himself to make others happy. And she was going to change that. Even if things didn't work out between them, she wouldn't let him throw away his happiness just so he could sit on the sidelines and watch as everyone else laughed and loved together. Temari's sleep had been fitful. Her thoughts were consuming her and this wasn't what she wanted, especially before a big date. Or a little date at least. She wanted to have fun, and with Naruto, that was a very big possibility. Of course, since it was Naruto, there was also the prospect that her evening would end with her beating the hell out of him. Either way, at least her evening wouldn't be boring. Temari didn't even bother stopping at the gates of Suna. She flashed her pass, although it wasn't necessary since everyone knew who she was and looked up at the sky. Perfect. If Naruto still had his schedule, then she'd just catch the beginning of his lecture. Gaara wouldn't mind much. She slid beside the building and peeked around the corner. Good. Naruto and the kids had just finished their morning run and would soon be done with their calisthenics. Then, lecture time. Deciding there was no need to hide, she leaned against the building and watched as her fellow blonde led the children through some stretches. She was reminded of her own education watching them all. Of course, her father being Kazekage led to her having a private tutor in Baki, along with her brothers. She hadn't had much interaction with kids her own age and that hurt. But seeing all these young ones trying made her smile. She watched as they all sat in a semicircle around Naruto. Showtime. Naruto had been having a good week. The kids' training was coming along nicely and they hadn't complained when he suggested they study history in their spare time. To him it wasn't important, but then again, it never hurt to study past battles and apply it to your current strategy. It never hurt to learn anything, and that was something he tried to impart to his students. Jiraiya was a perfect example of a ninja never stopping learning. The old hermit was fascinated with his Warak no Jutsu and tried multiple times to use it, but to no avail. It didn't mean he stopped learning though. Naruto looked out over his students and beamed them a smile. He still refused to learn their names, but he was quite proud of them. The other academy teachers had requested that he alert them when he was about to give a lecture, for what purpose Naruto didn't know. He made a few cage bunsins to go and tell the teachers he was ready, and that's when he saw Temari. Several of the younger kunoichi saw her as well and were excited to see the sister of the Kaze cage in a powerful jounin in her own right. He smirked and motioned for her to come over. Temari walked over as smoothly as she could, trying to make it seem like she was uninterested while trying to swing her hips as seductively as she could while being subtle. The kids wouldn't pick up on the body language, but Naruto sure as hell did. He'd hung around a perverted ninja too much not to notice that walk. He didn't let it faze him too long though, and he smiled at his housemate. "Hello Temari. Come to see the crop of students. Actually I've come to listen to one of your infamous lectures. They've gained quite a reputation and I want to hear at least one." "Okay. I didn't know they were that popular. I have to wait for the other teachers though. They wanted me for something. Hang around and I'll take you to lunch." Many of the students began to catcall at his offer and were immediately shushed by a stern glare from their teacher. Temari blushed slightly at the insinuation but caught herself enough to offer her own glare at the kids and walk back to her position at the wall, muttering about stupid brats. Naruto wasn't sure if that was aimed at his students or at him. After a few more minutes, the other teachers all came out with their students and sat behind Naruto's own. Temari quirked an eyebrow at the audience he had. Surely, his lectures weren't that great. They were good, but to empty the school just to listen to one? That was unheard of. She watched with slight trepidation as Urameshi Kari approached Naruto with a smile. "We're ready when you are, Naruto-san." Naruto looked at her perplexed. He truly didn't know what was going on. "Ready for what? Why did you all request I get you before my lecture?" "Why, because we wanted our students to listen to it. And it might give us some pointers so we can spice up our own lectures. Just be yourself and lecture about the subject you had in store for your students. Do us proud." Naruto gulped and straightened his back. He'd never had an audience of this size. It was one thing to preach to his own students, it was quite another to lecture to impressionable students who were the responsibility of others. He turned back to Temari and she gave him a reassuring smile and waved her hand in a circular motion, beckoning for him to begin. He sighed and turned back to the crowd. "Let me first thank all of you for taking time out of your schedules to come and hear what I have to say. I hope that I live up to your expectations. For those students who don't know me, I am Uzumaki Naruto, container of the Kyuubi. I am a former resident of Konoha, but I am now a Sunanin. It is my pleasure to speak to you today. I would like to speak to you all about loyalty to one's village and comrades today." Temari's eyes flew wide open. "Oh yes, this will be most interesting. Perhaps I should send for Gaara." There was no need. As if on cue, her brother appeared at her side. He nodded to her and turned his attention to his best friend. "I come from a village that espouses teamwork and loyalty above all else. And if I do say so myself, Konoha is pretty damn good at sticking to its guns. But there are glaring instances of shinobi going against that creed. I used to have a teammate by the name of Uchiha Sasuke, a holder of the Sharingan. We hated each other, but over time we began to get closer. His older brother wiped out his clan and he wanted to kill him. Sasuke would do anything to gain power to kill him, even if it meant selling his soul and betraying his village. I grew up with no one loving me, no one taking care of me. Sasuke had it all. People doting all over him, teachers lining up to take him as a pupil, a large inheritance, but he didn't care for any of it. As an Uchiha, he thought he was entitled to those things. Everything was given to him. I don't agree with that and I never have. Being given things breeds arrogance and the philosophy that you are better than everyone else. There is a subtle grace to learning something, attaining it the hard way. It makes you appreciate what you have more. And being taught breeds loyalty. Being taught means someone has a vested interest in you and your welfare. Being taught means you are worthwhile and therefore, you are loyal to that person because they take interest in you. I had a teacher in Konoha like that. I was the dead last, a word I hate and loathe with all my being. I hate the word prodigy, I hate the word genius. I had a teacher who didn't subscribe to that either, and he has my undying loyalty because he took an interest in me. Not much of one at first, but enough to show me that I was important. That I wasn't a nobody. I was Uzumaki Naruto and I meant something. Then came my next teacher. He was and is one of the laziest people I've ever met. He didn't want to be a teacher and only passed us because we somehow overcame his expectations and actually tried to help one another. One of those who espoused teamwork over everything. But aside from chakra control, he never taught me anything. But I was loyal to him because he noticed me. He wasn't the best person in the world, but he actually called me by my name. He didn't call me names. But then he cast me aside to a different teacher that didn't want me. And my trust in him was shattered. But I still wanted acceptance, and so my loyalty stood. Then my substitute teacher lost a one-sided fight with my master. I call him master because he is the only true teacher I've ever had. Jiraiya of the Sun-In is my master. I'd never admit that to his face, of course, but I am loyal to him without question. It's been said that I would do anything to help my friends, and that is true. I'd fight the Shinigami himself if I thought it would save my precious people. Notice that I never once said that I was loyal to Konoha. I was loyal to the people in it. That village never gave me a damn thing, and yet I still wanted to protect the people. You'd think that, it being one of their Yondame's final wishes, that the people of Konoha would see me as a hero and not as a monster. But that is the fate of a Jinhiriki, to be hated and reviled, even as we struggle to maintain our humanity in the face of adversity. It's been said that a person is smart. You can tell an individual something, and if they're given adequate time to weigh what they hear, they can form a rational opinion. People are dumb, stupid, ignorant animals, and together, they can bring even the most virtuous and righteous of men to their knees. Listen to me when I say it is good to be loyal to your village. It is your home and you should always protect it with everything you have. But without your precious people, a village is just a collection of buildings, a place where people live and sleep, and it will never be a home to you. But, love just one person and a village of enemies can become a sanctuary of the heart. Suddenly Naruto felt very heavy. He sat on the ground and crossed his legs. He sighed before starting again. That's not to say that loyalty and friendship are always rewarded. Loyalty is different from devotion. Devotion is blindly following after something and never seeing the bad in it. I did that when I was younger with one of my teammates. I chased her and was oblivious to the fact of how pathetic it made me seem. But still I protected my teammates against insurmountable odds and never once received a thank you. And despite my bubbly facade on the surface, I was quite bitter on the inside. It seemed that no matter what I did, my loyalties would never be returned. And then Sasuke defected to Orochimaru. The same man who tried to destroy our home, all because of a promise of power. The price of said power was his body and mind, and yet he didn't care. As long as his brother died. And so our bonds were broken. And like an idiot, I kept trying to reshape those bonds and bring him back. I couldn't accept that he would willingly betray his village. And I had made a promise to my crush and I couldn't break that bond either. That was how my loyalties lay. But of course, my story is complicated and there are many variables that I haven't brought to the surface. The point of the lecture is that loyalty takes both sides being true to one another. Trust is the key. If you trust your comrades with your life and they can trust you with theirs, then you have their loyalty and you have theirs. If you can trust your village never to betray you, and you show that you will never betray it, you both are loyal to one another. But loyalty is a two-way street and both sides have to be willing to walk it. Remember when you leave today, that trust and loyalty are some of the hardest things to attain and some of the easiest things to break. One incident is all it takes to completely shatter whatever bonds you had with those precious to you. And that trust and loyalty may never be rebuilt. And if it is, it will take a long time. That's a sad truth, but it is a truth nonetheless. I want all of you to think on this. Naruto looked around and all eyes were on him. The children sat in awe at the frank discussion and even the teachers were impressed. Naruto sighed and smiled at the throng. Sometimes he felt so old. Remember to protect those precious to you. I say that quite a lot, but it is a rule to live by. Remain true to your ideals and your loyalty will never be questioned. And if anyone ever questions your loyalty, work twice as hard to prove you are the better man. Do not sink to their level, questioning a fellow ninja's integrity. If there is one thing I cannot stand, it is a traitor to one's village and friends. If any of you ever turn on our home, At this, Naruto channeled a fraction of the Kyuubi's power to change his appearance and give his voice that demonic edge. Everyone in attendance, except the Sand siblings, were frightened at the sense of power. When he wanted a point across, he'd get the point across. I will have no mercy upon you. I will request to be the one to hunt you down. All of you children are vital to this village's survival. Do not let visions of grandeur and false power lure you into betrayal. Do not fall into the trappings of others more foolish than you. Naruto let the demonic chakra fade and watched as the audience caught their breath. To their credit, the kids looked awestruck. Perhaps, there was hope for him here if they were so understanding. I'm sorry if I frightened you, but you must understand that I will not tolerate traitors. You were taught to be ninja, the best of the best, in this village, and you should never abandon it. If things don't go as you wish, try to change it. Don't run from your problems. Face them head on and I'll always be proud of you. Now I'm going to lunch and I suggest you do too. I'm starving. Whatever tension was in the air dissipated immediately. The teachers all chuckled and ushered the kids back inside. Naruto strode to the Sand siblings and put his hands on his hips while giving them a foxy grin. Well? How'd I do? Gaara umphed and nodded his head. It had been a good speech. Temari smirked at him and crossed her arms under her chest. Was the demonic chakra necessary? Some of them might have pissed their pants. They need to understand the dangers of running off and betraying the village. If someone had threatened Sasuke like that, I don't think he ever would have left. Gaara sighed and shook his head. In any event, you two come to my office and we'll have lunch before you return to your class, Naruto. Temari, you have to give me your report anyway. Gaara shined away, leaving the two blondes. Temari threw an arm around Naruto's neck and grinned. And after class, you and I have to discuss the particulars of our date. I hope you've been saving up while I've been gone. I have expensive tastes. She too disappeared. Naruto stood blinking for a moment before sighing. Why did I ever agree to that? There was no answer as he shined away. But the wind seemed to carry a lilting laughter on it at the Jinhiraki's plight. Lunch with Gaara was always a blast, one way or another. Usually Naruto would just talk and Gaara would listen while doing paperwork, but occasionally he would ask Naruto's opinion on a document. That always brought a smile to his face. Currently, however, said blonde did not have a smile on his face and was quite displeased with how Temari's report was going. Apparently none of his friends thought he was cut out to be a teacher. That didn't make his day any better, and from the sour look on Temari's face while she was relaying it to Gaara, she hadn't appreciated it either. And that's that, Gaara. The exams will be in Kyumigakure this time and any eligible students are welcome. I'd personally rather not send any genin to Kyumo. I don't trust them. Yes, I quite agree with you. I think we'll withhold from sending any teams this go around. Naruto, I'm sorry, but I think you need to return to your class now. I might come over this evening, but more than likely I'll be stuck here. Naruto nodded and left to finish out his day. He had plans for this weekend, plans that included Temari and reading some more of those scrolls. Hell, he needed to learn how to do the Raise-Non one-handed, so he'd send a couple hundred clones out to the desert to work on that. Hell, he'd make clones to read those scrolls while he was on his date with Temari. He had so much to do here, why not utilize his greatest advantage? And why the hell hadn't he thought of it sooner? He'd lost over 2 weeks that could have been put to use. The two siblings heard him growl in frustration as he left, but chalked it up to having to deal with the students the rest of the day. Temari turned back to Gaara and sighed. Hopefully Naruto would be in a better mood by the time their date rolled around. I think you deliberately left out some of your report while Naruto was here, Temari. Care to explain why? Well, I wanted to tell him those parts personally. They don't really affect the mission, it's more what his friends told me what they thought of him personally. Several of the people in that room caught me at different times during my stay in Konoha to ask about his development here and what I thought. I'm going to have to get a different hotel next time. They wouldn't leave me alone. I see. Well, Konoha is of no consequence to Naruto anymore. He is of Suna now. I'm sorry, Temari, but I have other matters to tend to. If you'll be so kind as to write up your report and turn it in later, you are excused. Temari nodded and left out the door, headed to the compound. Her thoughts were running to her date with Naruto and what she should wear. She didn't have anything beyond her normal clothes really. Well, she had a couple exquisite kimonos, but aside from that she didn't have anything. She was never one for formal dresses or suits. She didn't like pants, they constricted too much of her movement with the fan. Battle-style kimonos or her old battle dress were her favorite clothing. They allowed her full range of movement and in her opinion, made her quite the looker. She sighed as she walked through the compound's gates. Suna was her home and she never wanted to live anywhere else, but she loved the flora of Konoha. If only they had a garden in Suna, a park, something green. Her own experiments with gardening had ended on a low note. Even the desert flowers hadn't been able to grow under care. She laughed lightly at her misfortune. She was less nurturing than the desert. Yeah, that would attract the guys. Opening the door, she was greeted by the sight of two of Kankura's puppets swiveling their heads to look at her. She raised an eyebrow in annoyance at her brother's actions. He knew he wasn't supposed to bring his toys into the living area. Hey Kankura. He peeked around from a new puppet he was building and grinned at her. Hey sis. How was your trip? Aggravating. Any problems while I was gone? Nah. You missed a bunch of good meals, but other than that, no. Naruto spent most of his time cooped up in his room, muttering something about land and making it fertile. He has some plans for the property he's trying to acquire apparently. Really? I hope he remembers we're in the desert. There's not much you can grow beside cactus out here. Ah well, he'll figure it out soon enough. Not like there's enough of a water source to support a garden anyway. Hey, you never know sis. That kid's surprised us all before. Maybe he can do something. At the very least, he might have a window box. And I say that the area is too acrid and dry to sustain anything. But we'll see. Now if you'll excuse me, a hot shower and a good night's sleep are in order. Oh, and you missed another good lecture by Naruto today. I caught him giving one on loyalty to one's village. And you missed several good ones while you were gone. You know he has other teachers recording what he says to use for future classes? It's a totally new teaching system for Suna. Maybe we should share it with Konoha. I don't think we should share anything with those assholes. Before he could ask what she meant, Tamari was up the stairs and had the shower running. Kankura shrugged and went back to tweaking the traps on his newest puppet. His sister had always been an enigma to him, why should anything be different now? Tamari calmed as the hot water cascaded down upon her. She moaned as she felt her muscles loosen and she did what she always did while in the shower. She sat down so that the hot water fell like rain and crossed her legs, letting the warm feeling wash over her. It always helped her to think to do this and it was relaxing. She closed her eyes and thought about her current situation. She'd heard talk since Naruto was staying with them that he was one of the best-looking guys in Suna. No arguments there, but these women didn't even know him. They knew he was a Jinhuriki and she had heard more than one say they'd like a go at the demon. That pissed her off. People like Naruto and her brother were not sex toys. What they wanted, more than anything, was to be loved like a normal person, not touted and revered for the demon in them. They especially did not want to be fucked simply for their stamina. Most Jinhuriki seemed to stay away from relationships and physical contact if at all possible. Naruto was an exception, but even he had problems with public affection. A simple hug could leave him disoriented and confused if it wasn't a person close to him. She'd have to break him of that. She shook her head to rid herself of the depressing thoughts. Now then, what should she wear for her date? She nearly squealed with anticipation. She'd never actually been on a date. Eating out with Shikamaru had been about the closest she'd ever gotten to it. Hopefully, nothing would ruin it. She sighed happily and washed her body off. She felt better than she had in days. Amazing what a hot shower could do to help one's mood. Wrapping a towel around her torso and rubbing furiously at her hair, she glanced at the clock. She'd been in there for over an hour. Naruto should be getting home in a couple hours, but he probably wouldn't want to go out tonight. Best to wait for the next night. It was a weekend after all, and they'd have all the time in the world. Really and truly, she just wanted to crawl into bed and sleep. In fact, that was a hell of a plan. If Naruto was cooking, she'd smell it and bolt downstairs anyway. She dove under the covers and snuggled against her pillow. She'd just take a quick nap. Naruto watched with pride as his students left the room. They were coming along nicely in his opinion. One of them had managed to make it onto the ceiling that day and stayed for all of 3 seconds before plummeting to the floor. Yes, they were coming along nicely. Henge was quickly becoming their favorite pastime, and he had begun to send them out to infiltrate the other classrooms. He placed a clone in the hallway to watch for any students going to the bathroom and would wave over a random student to go and replace them in the classroom. This had become a favorite game of his students. One of his students had managed to not only infiltrate a classroom, but to disrupt it as well. The teacher, one of the ones Naruto didn't get along with, had chased the student out and was trying to punish him, but he'd run back into Naruto's classroom and dropped his henge, while taking his seat. The teacher had come crashing through the door and demanding to know where the kid was. Naruto just shrugged and politely asked the man to leave before he made him. None of his students had left the classroom all day. As the man left in a fury, Naruto turned and winked at the kids, sending them into giggle fits. He'd become a favorite teacher at the academy and the children loved to hear him speak. They said he made everything interesting. He hummed as he walked home. He still needed to ask Gaara for an assistant who was good at taijutsu and genjutsu. Oh well, he had an entire weekend for himself now. No reason not to get a little done. As soon as he crossed through the gates into the compound, he summoned a couple hundred clones, give or take a few, and split them into 3 groups. Alright, this group I want working on making the raise non one-handed. Don't stop until you are out of chakra. This one I want working on making the raisin shuriken more complete so it doesn't kill me. And you last few, I want reading the scrolls I brought. One of the clones asked him what he was going to be doing. I'll be cooking for tonight and trying to convince Gaara to let me have a plot of land if he comes over. Now get busy, there's a lot to cover. And if any of you exhibit certain fox-like traits, destroy it. We don't need any unnecessary episodes. The clones all saluted and disappeared to do their assigned tasks. Naruto walked inside, waved to Kankura and walked to his bedroom. He couldn't wait to get his own place. Not that living with the Sand siblings was a bad thing, he just wanted more space. And he wanted to try out his mother's ideas for raising a garden. Deserts, after all, used to be places that were teeming with flora and fauna but died out for some inexplicable reason. Most of the natural water sources were far below ground now and would need to be brought up by other means. Before he cooked anything, he wanted to read a little more on that scroll. The more he read, the more intrigued he was. The first Hokage had been a Mokuton user, but no one really knew where the ability had come from. It was an unknown ability. His mother had been able to duplicate it, to a certain extent, to make her garden massive and the most beautiful in Konoha. He'd noticed several unidentifiable species of flowers when he'd visited his parents' home, but they were wild now, and untamed from years of lack of care. He just needed the land to try his luck. Naruto looked over at the clock and decided it was time to get up and cook supper. As he opened his door, he felt that slight jar in his mind as a clone dissipated and the memories came to him. He smiled and lifted his right hand, trying to form a raise-non without help from a clone. It began to form but then disintegrated. He was getting there though. Just a little while longer and all his efforts would pay off. He sauntered into the kitchen and turned on the stove. Teriyaki chicken and stir-fried vegetables sounded good tonight. Naruto watched as Kankura appeared nearly instantly and began wolfing down his food. Naruto waited in his seat for Temari to arrive, but after a couple minutes he began to worry. Hey Kankura, Temari is here, right? Yeah, she's probably asleep. She was tired when she got in. Naruto sat there picking at his food. He just couldn't eat if they weren't all there, and Temari had probably been asleep for several hours. He rose from his seat and Kankura stared at him, confused. Where you going? Naruto turned back to him and his head jarred again as another clone released. I'm going to wake her up. She needs to eat it while it's warm. It doesn't taste good reheated. Well, tell her to hurry up or I'm eating her portion. Naruto nodded and headed up the stairs. As he went he tried another raise-non. This one was a little bit more developed but he still had little to no control over the shape. Soon. He crept up to Temari's door and cracked it slightly. He'd never been in her room before and had no reason to be in it before. He pushed it open further when he heard the soft sounds of her rhythmic breathing. She was in a deep sleep, obviously tired from her trip. She still needed to eat though. He took in the surroundings and a small smile found its way to his face. Temari, although she prided herself on being one of the toughest bitches you'll ever meet, was still a little girl at heart. She apparently adored stuffed animals, since several adorned the walls. Beyond that, she didn't have much. It was a standard ninja bedroom, jutsu scrolls, her battle fan against a wall, weapons hung on racks. Naruto crossed the room and stood beside the bed. Temari had not put her hair into the familiar ponytails, and with her hair flowing around her, she looked more beautiful. A soft smile came across his face. Perhaps dating someone who could look so angelic one moment and be a complete tigress the next wouldn't be a bad thing. First, he had to get past their first date though. Rousing himself from his whimsical thoughts, he shook her shoulder and softly told her to wake up. Temari had been having a dreamless sleep and it was very relaxing. Usually, her mind was so all over the place that she couldn't sleep. She groaned when she felt something soft touch her shoulder and begin to shake her. The voice calling out to her was very gentle and it reminded her of days when her mother was still around. Thinking of those days made her heart ached and she latched onto the familiar feeling. Naruto hadn't been expecting Temari's arm to shoot out and grab his. Nor had he expected her to pull him onto the bed and roll over, hugging him like he was a teddy bear. Although the act was quite comfortable, and maybe she'd be willing to do it again later, the food was getting cold and he didn't want to have to explain to an angry Temari why he was in her bed. He tried to move but she latched onto his waist and snuggled against him, rubbing her face against his stomach. He tried not to laugh at the childish gesture but it was hard. He tried to wiggle out again, no go. She had a death grip on him. Temari was enjoying the warm sensation. She had been comfortable under her covers, but she had neglected to take something soft to cuddle with when she dove under them. She couldn't quite remember purchasing or receiving this particular toy however. It was soft and yet hard, but not unpleasant. It smelled of the earth and the forest, and chicken teriyaki. And it kept trying to rouse her from her sleep while whispering softly. Her eyes slowly cracked open to see what exactly she had in her arms. They flew open when she saw the golden tresses and familiar sheepish grin of one Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto had been trying in vain to escape the kunoichi's clutches but to no avail. He looked down when he heard a gasp and then a growl, straight into Temari's wide eyes. Time to run damage control. Temari, before you think what I know you're thinking, I came up here to tell you supper's ready. I was shaking your shoulder and you yanked me on top of you. I couldn't get loose. You have a very firm grip, do you work out? He scratched the back of his head and tried to look as cute as possible. In recent years, he'd figured out that the more clueless and hapless he looked, the easier it was to get away with things. He was thoroughly surprised when Temari sat up on her knees and grabbed him by the front of his shirt, shortening the distance of their noses by a couple centimeters. He'd been drug up to his knees as well when she grabbed him and he took note that at the moment her legs were on either side of his right thigh. And she wasn't wearing pants. Or panties for that matter. In fact, if that oversized shirt rode up just a little higher, Naruto blushed at the implications and his gaze snapped back up to meet Temari's. Temari noticed that his gaze traveled down to where she was essentially sitting on his thigh. She hadn't thought much about it until she remembered that she wasn't wearing any underwear. She fought to keep the blush down and pulled him closer until the tips of their noses touched before she growled out. Not only do I expect you never to mention this, I expect my date later to be flawless, you hear? And the one after that better be just as spectacular. Naruto gulped and nodded before he realized something. The one after? But we haven't gone out on our first date yet. Temari smirked and patted his cheek. It was fast becoming a favorite taunt when dealing with him. Why Naruto, I'd be stupid to let such a fine male specimen get away from me after just one date. Besides, I seem to be losing more and more of my clothing every time I see you. Maybe next time, I'll lose everything. Naruto just nodded dumbly and watched as Temari smirked before shoving him backwards, dumping him out of the bed and onto the floor. I'll be down shortly to eat, now get the hell out of here unless you want me to kill you. She laughed lightly as Naruto disappeared without a trace. I am going to have so much fun with him. Temari emerged shortly thereafter to find a full Kankura and a badly blushing Naruto. She sat at her usual seat and began shoveling the chicken into her mouth. It was really good. Hopefully he had a dessert prepared for tonight. It would cap off a most entertaining evening. She waved at Kankura as he left to begin his patrol. He'd drawn a night duty this time. She didn't envy him a bit. Night times in the desert were always cold as hell. Hey Temari. Yeah. I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to offend or anything. She sighed and shoved her plate away. The guy was too concerned with others' welfare and way too apologetic. Naruto, you don't have to apologize for something that you didn't mean to happen. I'm not upset. Okay, hey Tamari. Yeah. I don't think you told me and Gaara the whole story about your trip. Did something else happen while you were there? If you give me some dessert, I'll tell you. Naruto smiled and left into the kitchen, coming back with an apple pie. Tamari stared at it hungrily and held out her plate. He chuckled and cut her a generous portion, which she immediately devoured and held out her plate for another. You don't get any more until you tell me more about your trip. Fine. I told you everything about the meeting in the office. What I didn't tell you was that all your friends came to talk to me at different times to see how you were doing. Most were genuinely curious and wanted to know how you were faring. The Hyuga girl was happy that you were getting along so well. Her teammates were happy for you too. The others all just wanted particulars of what you were doing and why you chose Suna, whether or not I was actually going to go on a date with you, that kind of thing. The two most interesting were your former sensei and your teammate, Sakura. Tamari was lounging in her hotel room, enjoying a snack of dango and chilled sake, when she heard knocks on the door. She growled as she got up. Those friends of Naruto's were about to drive her up the goddamn wall. They just wouldn't leave her be. The only ones who had been somewhat pleasant were Hinata, who had treated her to dinner in exchange for some stories about the amicable blonde, and Irika, who had offered to help her with whatever paperwork she might have this trip if she shared some of Naruto's teaching secrets with him. She was shocked to see Naruto's two ex-teammates standing before her. Sakura spoke up hesitantly. Tamari-san, may we come in? We just want to ask a few questions and then we'll leave. Tamari sighed and gestured for them to come in. Sure, why not? Everyone else has come by, I figured you two would be among the first. She waited until they were situated in the room's two chairs and she took up her station on the bed, sitting cross-legged while munching her dango. Well, go ahead, ask away. Kakashi cleared his throat and ran a hand through his silver hair. Tamari did not like the man. She had heard Naruto's story of the Chunin exam and how he had asked Kakashi to stop Gaara's fight with Sasuke, fearing for his friend's life. Kakashi had blown him off and nearly caused Sasuke's death. No, she definitely didn't like the laid-back Jounin. We just think that some of the things you've said are a little over-exaggerated. For one, Naruto can't be a Chunin without passing an exam. The Kazekage himself promoted him. Very well. But him being a teacher at a school and only having been there for a short time. It doesn't sound plausible, and Naruto doesn't have the necessary skills to teach anyone. Tamari narrowed her eyes and sat the dango down. She'd suddenly lost her appetite. And why, pray tell, is he not fit to teach? What makes him so unfit? Naruto doesn't even have a good grasp of the basics. How can he teach others something when he can't even do it? It doesn't add up. Yes, Tamari-san, Naruto was always the weakest at the basics in the academy and on our team. Besides, he can't be around children with him being as unstable as he is. Unstable? How dare you say he's unstable? Those kids love him and the way he teaches is perfect. He teaches practical things, not stupid-ass things like useless history and meaningless theory on simple techniques. But those things are vital to a ninja's growth. No, what is vital to a ninja's growth is that they realize that they aren't invulnerable, that there are always ways to grow and learn. They aren't bulletproof. Naruto is teaching those kids life skills, not just jutsus and book smarts. Sakura got a little miffed at the mention of book smarts. That was always her strong point. Well, that idiot couldn't teach about that anyway. He doesn't know jack about history. Tamari laughed at the two and picked her dango back up, taking a bite. You'd be surprised what that guy knows. He's not going to teach them history, he has them learning that at home. He's going to teach them useful things. He's already teaching them chakra control by having them walk up walls. He's teaching them infiltration by using henge. He'll be starting them on kawarimi soon. He's beginning to build up their muscles and reserves by making them exercise. He's a good teacher. And how does he keep them in line? I know personally how much of a handful he was to teach. He uses Kage Bunshin to teach each one personally. That way no one is left out. Tamari watched with satisfaction as realization dawned on the two's faces. But she also knew that changing an opinion didn't happen in one day. And these two were always some of Naruto's biggest detractors, no matter how well they covered it up. Well, I guess it's true that everyone has a niche in life. Naruto was never as strong as Sasuke-kun, so I guess teaching would be more his speed. He's broken his promise to me anyway. Temari nearly growled at the girl. Is that all he's useful to the two of you for? Bringing back that god-forsaken Uchiha? Ugh, I don't know why he cares about the three of you, it's beyond me. If you don't have anything else to say, I'd suggest you leave before my fan finds its way into my hands. Sakura and Kakashi stood abruptly, both rather angry at this point. Naruto was theirs, no one else's. He was the one that tied their group together, and the fact that he had left still stung. Kakashi left without another word, but Sakura was used to getting in the last jab and turned at the door. I suggest you rethink your stance on dating him too, Temari. He's not normal, you know. There's no telling what he'd do to you in a relationship. Temari simply shoved the girl out into the hallway and ground out her reply before slamming the door in her face. I know that he's one of the best guys I've ever met, and you're just jealous of me, because you weren't able to keep him under your thumb. Face it, Haruno, your first choice sucked and ran off to play grab ass with a snake, and your backup left because all but a few didn't appreciate him. You lose at the game of life and I might actually win. Now fuck off, I need my beauty sleep. She slammed the door in the girl's face and turned around, but heard her call through the door. You can't sleep for beauty if there was never any beauty there in the first place, you bitch. Temari chuckled and kept eating her dango before going to bed. Yeah, but beauty's only skin deep, Haruno. Ugliness goes a lot deeper, and I think the blonde idiot finally saw that. That's why he left your village. Konoha's ugliness ran pretty damn deep. Naruto sat back and whistled after she finished. Temari held out her plate and he cut her another piece of pie. Wow, that's a hell of a story there, Temari. I never could really get a good grasp on what those two actually thought of me. Kakashi helped me with the cage bunshin trick, but that was also Yamato-sensei doing most of the work. Kind of sad, that my closest friends don't really see me as reliable. Temari nodded and finished off her pie, letting the fork drop with a clink. Don't let it get to you, Naruto. They're idiots, and one day, they'll realize how wrong they were to let you go. But before that, you and I have a date to plan. Naruto smiled and grabbed the plates, throwing them in the sink before filling it up to wash them. Temari appeared beside him and smiled. What ya doing? I'm going to help you with the dishes. Besides, I can't let you do everything around her, can I? Sure you can. I don't mind, and the two of you have more duties than I do. But anyway, what about our date? Temari shivered when she heard the words our date. It seemed almost surreal. She smiled as he handed her a dish to dry and put away. Since you don't know the layout of the village very well or the best restaurants, I thought I'd pick everything. You just have to show me a good time. I promise to show you the best evening of your life. And if you don't, what would you have me do? Temari put her finger to her lip thoughtfully. The chances of this date failing were slim to none, but hey, it never hurt to have a contingency plan. And he was basically offering himself to her. She smirked as she thought of a fitting punishment. You have to be my slave for a whole day, complete with loincloth and a dog collar. What I say goes, no questions asked. Deal. Naruto paled when he heard the conditions. That was a little harsh. Don't you think that's a little extreme? And Kankura wouldn't ever let me live it up. Temari batted her eyelashes at him and patted his cheek. God, he looks so cute. Well, I guess you'd better not fuck up our date then, huh? Otherwise, I may get to see a side of Uzumaki Naruto nobody ever has. Or rather, a certain something no other girl has ever seen. The blood seemed to rush to Naruto's face and he pressed himself against the counter so she couldn't see or get to his prized possession. Temari fought down a laugh and continued drying the dishes. I think I'm starting to like him. He's definitely boyfriend material. And I wonder what he would look like in a loincloth. She refused to answer Naruto's question of what the nosebleed was all about. Naruto woke up the next morning at the crack of dawn. There was much to do and so little time to do it. He needed to perfect the Rasengan and the Raisin Shuriken. He had made good progress with the Rasengan and was well within completing it fully. The Raisin Shuriken was another story altogether. It was still shredding his arms and the memory of that pain was not comforting. Luckily, none of his clones had had a Kyuubi episode and hadn't needed to be dispelled. He figured that another 200 clones and he'd have Rasengan perfected by lunch. He wondered how many he should dedicate to the shuriken technique as he wandered down to start breakfast. He wanted to avoid Tamari as much as possible, at least until that evening. That way they'd have something to talk about. He grunted as he grabbed some eggs out of the fridge. Thinking in too many directions had never been his strong point. First, he had to get his priorities straight for the day. As he sat the frying pan down on the burner and turned it on, he quickly stepped outside and formed 200 clones. He gave them their instructions and they rushed off into the desert to work on the technique. He figured it wouldn't be too long now. He shuffled back inside and cracked the eggs against the pan, pouring the yolks inside. Stage 1 complete, now for stage 2. He waited for his eggs to finish before putting them on a plate and taking a seat at the table. As he quickly ate, his mind turned back to his date for the night. She was certainly a lively one. She loved to tease him for some reason, and yet, even when she was aggressive, there was an underlying playful tone to it. He shook his head and wolfed the rest of his eggs down. He couldn't afford to be distracted today. There was too much to do. Not wishing to wash his plate at the moment, he threw it in the sink and walked out the door. He focused and summoned nearly 500 clones, gave them their orders, and they left to start the Raisin Shuriken Jutsu. He hoped they would make some headway today. Turning on his heel, he began to trek to Gaara's office. He wanted to get started on his land if possible. Gaara had been having a peaceful morning, something not often seen in Suna. His hopes for it remaining like that were crushed when he saw Naruto walk through his door pulling an angry secretary behind him. The Kazekage winced and sighed heavily. His blonde friend could be such a pain in the ass. I'm telling you, you don't have an appointment to see Kazekage-sama. Please leave now. And I'm telling you, I'm a friend of his and it'll only take a moment. Get off me, lady. Mori, leave him be. I'll deal with him. The woman bowed and shot Naruto another glare before shutting the door behind her with a firm click. Naruto huffed and sat down in the chair in front of Gaara, ignoring the swirling sand behind him. And why have you chosen to grace me with your presence this morning, Naruto? I hope it isn't anything too pressing? Or have you decided to renege on your date with my sister? Easy, easy. Nothing like that. I was just wondering if you'd found a plot of land for me to purchase yet. I was kind of hoping to get started on it. Gaara blinked twice and turned around to grab a scroll sitting on his windowsill. He tossed it to Naruto and leaned back in his chair. It's on the outskirts of the city, outside the walls. It's all I could get you that put you away from everyone else. You have virtually unlimited space, it's larger than the compound. There is a small spring located in a cave on the property and sparse vegetation like you asked for. It is truly a desolate little piece of dirt. Why did you ask for those specific requirements? Naruto grinned at his friend and stood to leave. He needed to inspect his new home. Because even a flower on the verge of dying can be brought back to bloom beautifully if taken care of with tenderness and love. Remember that, Gaara. Naruto left out the room, glaring at the secretary as he went by. Gaara could have sworn that he saw electricity shoot between the two. He sighed as he ushered in his next appointment. A dying flower, huh? I wonder if you can actually do anything with that dirt pit. Tamari groaned as she woke up and stretched, her oversized t-shirt riding up over her toned tummy. She always slept in late on weekends she was off, simply because there was nothing better to do. Besides, she'd need all her energy for tonight. If there was one thing she'd learned over the years, it was that when with Naruto, expect the unexpected and be well rested. You never know what kind of trouble would follow the boy. She was somewhat irked to find that Naruto had left the house already, leaving just her there alone. While not normally a problem, she had become somewhat accustomed to having the blonde there in the house somewhere. He was like a security blanket, as long as he was close she felt safe. Hell, the other night, he had been reading a scroll on the couch in the living room and she had plopped down beside him to see what he was reading. Her curiosity piqued when she saw it was a gardening scroll. After several minutes of reading over his shoulder she had suddenly became sleepy and fell asleep propped up against his shoulder. She had woken hours later to find the blonde passed out sitting up and herself stretched out lengthwise, her head in his lap, with a blanket over her. She secretly wished for more nights like that, and who knows what the future may hold. It had been comfortable and comforting to just sleep leisurely like that. And he hadn't seemed to mind in the least, as long as she wasn't trying to grab his goodies. She giggled as she remembered the night before. He had been afraid she was going to make a grab for him. Of course she wouldn't. She'd never do that. She might tease and bully slightly, but she'd never act inappropriately toward someone she was genuinely interested in, and there weren't many she was interested in. As she poured herself some cereal, she thought back over the past few weeks. Her fellow blonde had invaded her thoughts constantly and, while annoying at times, the thoughts about him were always happy ones, filled with laughter and mirth. Even the stoic, stony Gaara loosened up around the last Uzumaki. Not much, mind you, but enough to count. Tamari's eye twitched as she threw her bowl into the sink. All this thinking was messing with her head. Screw it. I'm going to the hot springs and then the salon to get ready for this evening. Naruto nodded to the gate guard as he stepped out of the safety of Suna and into the desert to make his way around the wall to his new home. He whistled as he walked, the hot air blowing in his face. This was not his native land. The trees, the rivers, the forest, the sweet, clean air, that was his home. But here, in this barren wasteland, perhaps he could bring a little of his home closer to him. If his mother's jutsus were worth anything, perhaps he could restore what was once lost. He could bring life back to that which was all but lifeless. He looked around as he entered the grounds that Gaara had laid out for him. He could see the cave up on a hillside, the mouth gaping like that of a fish. Naruto grimaced as he spun around, taking it all in. There was a cactus here and there, but other than that, no vegetation. I believe Gaara and I have a different definition of the word sparse. When he said sparse, he meant a plant every few feet, not 9 or 10 total in the whole area. He walked into the cave and looked around. It had a hole in the ceiling that filtered light in, and he noticed immediately why the place was lit up. Crystals of all shapes and sizes were everywhere. Prisms throwing light in every direction. It was spellbinding. He'd absolutely have to bring Tamari here, that thought threw him for a loop. But upon further introspection, yes, he would bring her here. After all, it was pretty and girls liked pretty things. He walked to the far back of the cave and ran his hand over the rock. It was smooth and cool to the touch. Not like he'd expected. The spring in the middle of the cave was small and a pool of water had formed below it. He bent to drink and found the water cold and sweet. He'd have to inspect and see if he could find the source further down. He walked back outside into the sunlight and shielded his eyes from the sun. He turned back to stare into the cave one last time and saw a pair of black eyes staring back at him from the pool. The creature sat on 2 legs staring at him while washing something in the water. Its bushy tail swept back and forth and its banded eyes seemed to bore into him. He watched as its whiskers twitched before its eyes widened and it suddenly poofed out of existence. Was that a raccoon? He shook his head and cursed himself for not covering up more while out under the accursed sun. He was already starting to hallucinate. Better to finish up what he wanted to do before heading back to the compound to research more. He walked down the hill and stopped beside a cactus at the bottom. He sat down underneath it in the shade of one of its arms and crossed his legs, his hands clasped together, his eyes screwed shut. He shut out everything around him, the wind, the sand, the blistering heat of that dimmed sun. He focused only on what lay beneath him, the untapped potential that the desert had lost for ages. He lost himself in the green, remembering his mother's written words. It is not enough to see the green, feel the green, you must lose yourself in the green, bring it to the surface, make it bend to your will. You must push the life-giving chakra into the green and force it into the sun. If it is existing flora, make it flourish. Make it large, make it beautiful. If it is a seed, make it grow, make it strong, make of it what you will. The hardest thing to accomplish is to make green from nothing. The Shodaime Hokage was able to make Konoha by utilizing his jutsu. The green bowed to him and observed him as its master. But no man since has come close to ruling the green. The green is reluctant to serve. One must make it their own. Making barren land fertile again is a worthwhile cause, but it must be for the right reason. If one seeks to make the green come forth for ill will, the green will turn on that person and consume them. The green is like all other elements. It only bends because it wants to and recognizes the wielder as worthy of that power. One must have a tie to nature to use the green. If you are able to utilize the green, it will follow you wherever you go. It will help you in life. The green is vain and wants to be seen as beautiful. To bring the green to a place where there is no green makes it stand out and it will be pleased. And remember always, the green can be your best friend, or your worst enemy. If you cannot make peace with it, better to let it alone than to be consumed by it. Naruto had pondered her words for quite a while now and thought he understood them. As long as he didn't use the green for malicious purposes, it would help him make this land beautiful again. All he had to do was act as the conductor and let it take its course. He shuddered when he felt the first spike as it began to creep toward the surface. He could literally feel it coming. Soon he felt the ground vibrate and sand began to erupt everywhere around him. After several moments everything settled back down and he opened his eyes to find green. In a 15-foot circle around him, everything was green. There was soft grass and a few flowers, there was even a small shrub. He knew of course that they would die without water, but if he kept them watered daily, until he could secure a better water source, surely the green would forgive him if the first experiment failed. He stood and glanced around, happy with his advancement. It's not near what Mom could have done, but then again, I don't remember reading where she tried to bring life back to a desert. I hope you are happy with our arrangement. He knelt on the grass reverently and could feel a cool sensation pass through him. Whatever essence made up the green seemed to be pleased. That was a good sign. Naruto smiled and made his way back to the gates of Suna to get ready for his date. A furry figure watched from the mouth of the cave as the blonde ninja walked away, its eyes wide with excitement. He can make the green from nothing. The master will want to hear about this. Perhaps, we have found the right one. It poofed away without a trace, throwing one last glance at the luscious green grass. Naruto sighed as he walked past the site where his clones were training. One of them saw him and dispelled itself, the memories flooding his mind. All the Raiznon clones had perfected the technique and he smiled as he did it with no difficulty. It was like second nature now. Those clones had gone on to try to perfect the Raisin Shuriken, but that was still slow going. They were making small progress however. The blood flow was lessening with every try. He waved to the guards as he walked past toward the compound. It still was unsettling even now to be walking through the streets of a city and not be looked down upon. Hell, some of the girls were pointing and giggling at him. Not because he looked funny, but because they were thinking impure thoughts about him. It made him happy and sad at the same time. Happy, because he was finally seen as a heartthrob. Sad, because in Konoha, no matter how good he looked, he was a demon. As he walked through the gates of the compound, he grimaced and looked up at the sky. Ah fuck em. I've got a new life here. He walked inside to begin cleaning up for his date, and to get a little more study time in. Tamari hummed happily to herself as she walked home. Her time at the spa and salon had been wonderful. She couldn't remember the last time she'd gone there with intent to impress someone. Probably never, but hey, that's beside the point. She bounded up to her room to get ready for the evening, ignoring the sounds coming from Naruto's bedroom. She'd be seeing him soon enough. She began to dig through her closet to find something, anything to wear. She frowned at her minuscule selection. She really should have gone shopping earlier. All she had were kimonos and the old battle dresses she used to wear. Tamari was a practical girl though, and figured that a teal kimono would be best, as it complemented her eyes. She wasn't truly sure what he would be wearing, but then again, she didn't really care. He could show up in a clown outfit for all she cared, as long as she had a good time. She knew he was a good person and totally worthy of her consideration. This was just to get to know him better. She jumped onto her bed and grabbed a stuffed bear, cuddling it to her chest. The world outside may know her as a jounin, a kunoichi, the sister of the Kaze Cage, but here, in her own domain, she was a soft, caring individual. She loved her stuffed animals and the comfort they brought her. They helped her to think. And right now, she needed to think. She had a date to plan out and a boy to impress. She had her kimono, now she needed to finish the ensemble. Her shoes weren't of much consequence. She'd just wear some formal sandals and that was that. She never wore much jewelry, so a necklace wouldn't be a bad idea, but she didn't want him to take his eyes away from her. She wanted him to look at her, not at anything too glittery. Makeup was out of the question. She looked good without it and she knew it. Besides, she'd have to raid Kankura's room to get some and she absolutely refused to wear kabuki makeup. Nope, not happening. Her mind wandered to what Naruto was doing at the moment. She wondered if he was as worried over the date as she was. Naruto was freaking out. He had no idea what to do on a date. Sure, he'd gone out eating with his friends and had even eaten out alone with Sakura once, but Sai and Kakashi had interrupted them. He shook his head and looked back at the scroll that he had been intending to read further into. He was letting old memories get to him. He needed to look to the future. He needed to think about the date. Oh fuck. What time is it? He immediately swung his eyes to the clock and blanched when he saw he only had an hour to get ready. He snapped the scroll back shut and leapt off the bed, headed for the bathroom door. He needed to shower and then pick out what he was going to wear. Shit, hopefully Tamari wasn't very picky when it came to attire. He leapt out of the shower and began toweling off, his hair standing in every direction. He growled at the follicles, they never did what he wanted. He resigned himself to his usual hairstyle and ran to his closet. He wanted to knock her on her butt with his sense of fashion, but he had little in the way of evening wear. He'd have to use his normal clothes and try to look acceptable. At least he had one suit that was semi-formal. It would at least get him into any restaurant she wanted to go to. He threw on the outfit and summoned a clone to look him over. So? How's it look? The clone gave one last appraising look and offered a thumbs up. It'll work. You'll be able to get into formal places at least. Hopefully she'll approve. I think it looks okay. Naruto nodded and the clone dispelled itself with a salute. Naruto sat on the edge of his bed, a nervous wreck, and suddenly fell to the floor clutching his head. He growled and punched the floor. Which fucking clone's idea was it to dispel all at once? Fucking dumbass. Ugh, I hate when that happens. Feels like I've been kicked in the balls. He stood back up and shook to rid himself of the tingling feeling that came with an information overload. He glanced back at the clock and sighed. Might as well head downstairs and wait for Tamari to make her grand entrance. Tamari let out a long breath and opened her bedroom door. She was ready. This was it, the moment of truth. Her entire evening hinged on his reaction to her when she walked down those stairs. If she didn't get a favorable reaction from him, the date was as good as ruined right off the bat. And she didn't think she could take that. Tamari calmed herself and began her descent. It was showtime. Naruto sat on the couch, twiddling his thumbs nervously. It was nerve-wracking, waiting on the girl to come down. Luckily they had no time constraints, they had no one to oversee them. This was their night. He heard her soft footsteps coming down the stairs and stood to receive her. His jaw dropped at the sight and his eyes widened. There stood Tamari in a teal kimono that hugged every curve of her body, accenting everything that made her both dangerous and sensuous. Her hair was pulled back into the four familiar ponytails and Naruto was glad for that. He rather liked her unique hairstyle. She wore no jewelry or makeup, save for a locket on a choker around her neck that only diverted his attention for a moment. His eyes traveled all over her, taking in the luscious curves and the newly manicured toenails, back up to her taut stomach and the white sash around her waist, to her smooth arms and finally to her immaculate face. He drowned in her green eyes and had to pull away so that he wouldn't get lost in them. He stared at her pouting lips and barely registered the gasp that escaped her lips or the hand that rose to her chest. He was drinking up everything about her. She was beautiful. Tamari had walked downstairs slightly hyperventilating. She had rounded the corner of the small hallway and had kept her eyes unfocused until Naruto had taken in her appearance. She heard no response and her heart sank. Slowly, she raised her gaze until she saw how he was dressed and she gasped and her hand flew to her chest, right over her heart. Before her stood a young man who seemed to be chiseled from the finest stone, created by a master artisan. Everything about him screamed danger and yet, he also exuded a calming aura. His well-defined muscles were present under the long-sleeved white button-up shirt he wore, the black jacket slung over his arm. The black pants were loose and yet, If she squinted hard enough, she could see the well-muscled legs beneath them. He was the epitome of how a shinobi should look. She noticed how his hair fell over his eyes and gave him an otherworldly look. She liked it like that. His blue eyes seemed endless and Temari couldn't tear her gaze away from them. She was somewhat aware of the fact that he was blatantly staring at her and usually that would warrant a bash over the head. But for the moment, they were both allowed to look unhindered. She took in his whisker marks and suddenly wanted to touch them again. She wanted to run her fingers through that oddly feeling hair. He was perfect. Both let out breaths they hadn't known they were holding and he spoke before her. "You're so beautiful." She blushed slightly at the high praise and offered her own appraisal. "You're so handsome." Naruto let a nervous grin splay across his face and crossed the room to stand in front of her and held out his arm. "Shall we?" Temari smiled and hooked her arm in his. Tonight was going to be good. "Yes, let's." The crowd seemed mesmerized by the two blondes that walked through the city on their way to dinner. Neither had said anything during their walk, preferring to save conversation for dinner, but both felt extremely comfortable with one another. Temari, despite the chilled night air, felt warm and felt no sign of goosebumps on her arms. She knew how to use chakra to guard against the hot days and cold nights of Suna, but she was sure Naruto did not. The boy didn't seem bothered by this, however. He just walked on without a hint of discomfort, and it was then that Temari remembered that every time she had physical contact with Naruto it had been warm, like a blanket had enveloped her. It was then she realized that the boy emitted a natural warmth around him and whoever was in contact with him received that warmth. It was just right, a temperature that was pleasant, and with long enough exposure, could be like a tranquilizer. Temari was enjoying it already. They reached the restaurant she had chosen and were ushered in immediately. Temari chose the best food and drink for the both of them and they lapsed into conversation to pass the time. "So tell me, Naruto, what did you think when you found out who your parents were?" A sad smile flitted across his face and his voice echoed both his happiness and sadness. "I was both ecstatic and angered, at the same time. I finally knew who they were, I had pictures, I had a family. They might not be there, but they had loved me, I had been wanted. I didn't just appear out of nowhere, you know? I hadn't always been an unwanted child. As soon as I saw my mother's face I nearly fell into tears." The picture showed her with her hand on her belly. She'd been about 8 months pregnant with me and she seemed so happy. My father stood beside her with his hand beside hers. I was happy that I was his son, but at the same time. Naruto's face darkened and Temari stiffened slightly. "I hated him for what he did. I don't now, but for a second, I did. I understand that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, but the way Konoha treated me, were they really worth it? I wasn't chosen to be the jailer because of worth, I was chosen out of necessity. Any other child could have been the container, but I just happened to be born that day. Destiny? Or Kami's twisted sense of humor? Sometimes I wonder." He looked back up at her and smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, Temari. I got all gloom and doom on you. This is supposed to be a happy day. Don't apologize. Both of our families were torn by our father's decisions. Perhaps, what about you though? Let's hear about your family. You already know that, Naruto. I never really had a family beyond Kankura and Gaara. Our father was too busy leading a country and being an asshole to ever be a parent. Our mother was a loving individual to Kankura and I, but I question how loving she was when she cursed Gaara upon his birth. It hadn't been his fault that father implanted a demon in him. But she didn't curse father. She cursed her newborn son. I hate her for that." Temari looked into his eyes, expecting to see anything but the understanding she saw. How was it that the boy was so empathic? "I understand completely. I wonder at times if my mother cursed me for harboring a demon before she died. If she saw her son as a demon, instead of the child she gave birth to. You know, I don't even know if my whisker marks are natural or not. I guess it's my mark, kind of like the shape of my eyes and my canines. But enough about me, let's hear about you. What do you want to know? What you like, what you don't like, your dreams, you know, that stuff. This isn't a genin assignment, Naruto. You already know all that. Let's swap war stories. I'll start." They'd sat, sharing stories of their times as ninja of the past, until their food arrived. Conversation was put on hold immediately. Food was more important at the moment. Tamari covered her eyes with both hands and sighed. Everything had gone perfectly until the food arrived. They were hitting it off so well, and then Naruto became a bundle of nerves because he didn't want to offend her with his horrible manners. She, of course, didn't care, but he didn't want to embarrass her. He'd ended up spilling his drink all over her kimono, dumped some of his food on the floor, and had nearly dumped the table over when he stood up. She knew he wasn't that clumsy normally, he was just nervous. And now he was walking beside her with his head hanging in shame. She looked at him and frowned. He hadn't said a word since they'd left the restaurant. It just wasn't like the perpetually happy ninja to be depressed, and she was going to save their date one way or another. Naruto was despondent. He'd totally ruined everything. The one girl who had shown interest in him, true interest, and he'd fucked up everything. Why did he have to be such a klutz? It nearly brought tears to his eyes. She hadn't said anything to him since they'd paid the bill, and he hadn't the courage to say a word. It would only make the situation worse. He was suddenly jerked in the opposite direction by a firm hand. "Come on, Naruto, we're going somewhere else." He nodded his consent and let himself be led. When they got there, he'd apologize for his behavior and beg her forgiveness. Tamari sighed as they stood atop the cliff overlooking Suna. It was truly beautiful on a full moon. The minerals in the desert seemed to twinkle like a million stars. Her vision swung to the blonde beside her, his eyes still downcast. "Naruto." His head immediately snapped up. "Tamari, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do any of that. Please, forgive." "Shut up." Naruto winced and hung his head. So she really was pissed at him. Hot tears stung at the corner of his eyes. He'd tried so hard to make it perfect, but it seemed higher powers were working against him. He was just about to run home when a calloused, yet soft hand found its way to his cheek. "Naruto, look at me." He lifted his eyes to stare into her green ones. No matter what, he still thought they were beautiful. "I know you didn't mean any of that. And I'm not mad, I'm not disappointed. You had a bad night. You were nervous. I can understand that. I was nervous too. You didn't ruin your date's clothes." "No, I didn't. But I also realize that I'm not perfect. That could have easily been me, Naruto, dumping everything on you. I find you interesting, Uzumaki Naruto, and I never was one to let something that interested me go until I was satisfied with my conclusions about it. I'm sure your conclusion of me dropped a few notches tonight. No. I'm not holding tonight against you. You know what to expect of a date now. Next time will be better. And the one after that, and the one after that. It'll get better, I promise." Naruto gaped at the girl and his breath hitched. She had yet to take her hand away from his cheek. "But, why would you want to go on another date with me? Why take such an interest in me?" Tamari sighed and her hand dropped from his face to her side, as she turned back to the desert. She missed the warmth he gave off already and shivered slightly. "You're a good person, Naruto. No matter what anyone says, I know it, Gaara knows it, Kankura knows it, and you know it. I want to get to know you better because you're one of the few guys I've ever come across who seemed worthy of my time. And the fact that you're one of the few Gaara and Kankura would ever approve of doesn't hurt either. Their guidelines are way too strict." Tamari turned back to the stunned boy and patted his cheek affectionately. "Next time will be better. Let's say, next weekend? Now let's go home, I want to get out of this kimono." Naruto chuckled nervously as she took his hand. He didn't notice the smile on her face as his warmth ran over her body. Tamari sighed happily as they walked back inside the house. It had been an eventful night. She turned to Naruto and offered him a bright smile. "Despite what you may think, Naruto, I enjoyed the vast majority of our date. You did good, well above my expectations." His eye twitched at that. "You mean you expected a lousy date?" "No, I just didn't expect to have that much fun or be that comfortable around you. Now, we say good night." "All right then, good night, Tamari." He turned to go upstairs but turned back when he heard her cough and begin to tap her foot. "What? Did I forget something?" Yes, as a matter of fact. You forgot my kiss and hug. Kiss? Are you serious? On the first date? Not a make-out, you moron. A small, chaste kiss and a hug to let me know you appreciated our time together. I suppose that's acceptable. He crossed the room and enveloped her in a hug. He had always loved hugs since he never got them as a child. He didn't really know how to kiss though. That was one thing he was deficient in. Tamari, however, was glad to take initiative and pecked him on the lips, lingering only slightly. She pulled back and smiled at him, giving him one last squeeze. See? That wasn't so hard now, was it? I expect a kiss and hug after every date. Naruto nodded dumbly and began to trek back upstairs. This evening had gone beyond his expectations. Tamari followed him. Neither saw the figure appear out of the shadows holding a night vision camera. Heh, Blackmail City. Kankura, you are the man. Tamari lay on her bed in her nightshirt, a stuffed teddy bear in her arms. She couldn't get the kiss out of her head. It hadn't been more than 2 seconds, but that was enough to make her want more. It was like my whole body was on fire. I wonder if he can make that warmth flow throughout his whole body. The mystery of Naruto's warmth began to fade as sleep claimed her. She fell asleep with a smile on her face and a promise to thoroughly enjoy their next outing. It promised to never be boring with him around. Naruto was excited as all get out. He couldn't believe it. His first real kiss, and it had been great. Sure, it was just a chaste kiss on the lips, but it meant the world to him. In Konoha, he doubted he ever would have experienced that intimacy, even on a friendly level. Tamari liked him enough to trust him with a kiss though. If he died tonight in his sleep, he died happy. He made a promise as sleep claimed him that he would not fail her on the next date. So, you say he can control the green? Yes, I saw him make it from nothing. Perhaps we have found him, sire. Perhaps. I want you to keep an eye on him. If he can do this and his intentions are pure, we will help him. Our tribe will bring back the glory this land has lost for generations. The green has slept here for too long. He is a ninja though, my lord. He might expect us to aid him in battle. If he can bring back the green, it will be worth it. Our kind has not seen battle for ages. It would be quite a commotion were we to enter into the world again, especially for a wielder of the green. If he requires our aid, we shall aid him. Of course, my lord. Is that all you require of me? Hi. Keep an eye on this boy at all times. Recruit who you must to keep round the clock vigil. I am intrigued by him.